Για να δούμε που είμαστε. Λοιπόν, καλημέρα. Καλημέρα Κώστα, καλημέρα. Να δω κάτι. Οκ. Εντάξει, είμαστε από εδώ. Αυτό είναι μια χαρά. Λοιπόν, για να δούμε τι θα δούμε σήμερα. Λοιπόν, αυτό γιατί δεν έχει ξεκινήσει. Μάλλον δεν έχουν αρχίσει αυτοί, έτσι. Το πιο πιθανό. Ελέγξουμε τον ήχο. Καλά φαίνεται. Για να μ' ακούσω κι εγώ. Εντάξει. Καλημέρα Τσίλιν, καλημέρα. Μια χαρά ήχος, ωραία. Τι προβλέψεις έχουμε για σήμερα, παιδιά? Για άνοιγμα, τι λέτε? Θα κάνουμε και ένα πολλάκι. Λοιπόν... Καλημέρα, Ανδρέα. Ό,τι καλύτερα να βλέπεις τελικό παγκοσμίου πρωταθλήματος σκάκι με καφεδάκι και τσιγαράκι. Σωστός. Καφεδάκι είναι τσιγαράκι, όχι εγώ. Προβλέπω ύψος τα 3. Θα ήθελα να δω ρέτι κι εγώ. Θα ήθελα να δω ένα ρέτι άνοιγμα. Θέλω να δω Λονδίνο από Ding. Ενδιαφέρον. Και να νικήσω Ding. Εντάξει, περισσότεροι φαντάζω να κερδίσει ο Ding θέλουν. Οπότε έχω καταλάβει. Είμαι αισιόδοξη σήμερα για Ding πάντως. Αυτοί γιατί δεν έχουν αρχίσει ακόμα. Έχουν αρχίσει το broadcast, εγώ δεν το βλέπω. Α, έχουν αρχίσει. Α, πρέπει να πατήσω εδώ. Α, okay.
And because it was American Thanksgiving, I even went to an Indian curry house in solidarity. I got the fish head curry.
Ας ελπίσουμε να κερδίσει σήμερα, ναι.
Showed a picture to Vishy this morning. He approved of my choice. And you know what? Vishy's even making the first move today. So apologize to Ding. We didn't mention your name once. It's all India all the time. The mainland has little India. Sentosa Island might as well be big India. Can Gukesh keep it going? We're going to find out shortly.
Ο Κέλ πάλι είναι ίδιοι. Πάλι δεν έχει Ναροντίτσκι. Γιατί? Μ' άρεσε ο Ναροντίτσκι. Καλημέρα Ιωάννη. Καλημέρα. Πάμε γερά, πάμε.
Over 2 billion people, of course, supporting from the home countries of both of these contestants. Judith, I don't think we've ever had this many fans directly supporting a world championship match, and we've had some pretty big ones.
Το βιντεάκι, αυτοί ακούγονται κανονικά, εντάξει?
Absolutely, and I was just on the way sitting on the plane, I was thinking that basically, if Magnus was playing a world championship match, it was always known that the whole world is watching, right? But now we are seeing Magnus being out of the world championship match, and still the world is watching. Everybody's so excited who is going to be the world champion. Are we going to see a youngest world champion ever being Gukesh?
Όλα πένα, τέλεια, μια χαρά.
Ding will be able to defend his title. So it is a lot of excitement, fantastic location in Singapore. There are great vibes everywhere, as we see in different broadcasts as well. So it is really heating up, and it started out already with a great heat, and everybody was so excited about it. And so far, they gave a great show also about this game of chess.
And I want to latch onto that as well. If Gukesh wins the world championship, Robert, I know it's way too early to be talking about that, but he would be not only the 18th world champion, but the youngest ever world champion as well. We're ushering chess into a brand new generation.
Α, ναι, θα γίνει ο 18ος, αν το κερδίσει, και θα είναι 18 χρονών. Σημαντικό. Ας ελπίσουμε να μην συμβεί αυτό.
Couldn't be any more exciting. I'm just actually shocked that I heard the words great vibes from Judith.
Είδα τη συνέντευξη τύπου. Έχω αρχίσει ο Ding έχει αρχίσει να μου γίνεται ακόμα πιο συμπαθής. Δηλαδή έχω αρχίσει πλέον να γίνομαι φαν. Ξέρω, μου φαίνεται πολύ καλό τυπάκι. Και ο Gukesh καλός φαίνεται. Αλλά δεν ξέρω, ο Ding μου έχει γίνει πολύ συμπαθής. Καλημέρα Βασιλεία, καλημέρα.
For this to get underway. All three results are possible, not just in the World Championship, but of course in the game today as well.
Για πάμε, Liren, ναι. Team Liren μου φαίνεται, είμαστε περισσότεροι.
All you have to do is go to the chess.com event page, and once you click in there and you spot the current game from the World Championship, which is today's one, of course, you'll then be able to click into that, and on the top right of your screen, possibly underneath a TV screen if we're live at the time, you should be able to see social. That's where you can vote for the result of the game today. You can vote for a white win, a black win, or a draw, of course. And if you get your prediction correct, you can be one of 20 people who will be winning some pretty delicious prizes heading into the rest of today. The top prize is $400 worth of Chessable course vouchers. So,
έχει τέτοιο πράγμα. Οκ, ας ψηφίσουμε.
Is go ahead and use the vote chess function on chess.com.
Vote.
You can see the votes already coming in.
Εδώ.
Draw is currently winning the
White.
vote, but Gukesh winning is not too far behind.
Okay.
So we'll see if Ding can mount a comeback on the vote front as we move into the games soon rather than later. You can see just over 5 minutes now until the first move is played. Wow, I've just noticed how dark the playing hall looks from outside the plexiglass, and then as soon as you go to the camera inside, it's so well lit. That's not the playing hall, right? But that is absolutely beautiful where everyone is sat. Robert, your thoughts on the atmosphere live in Singapore?
Well, I see Ding looming large right there. We have a nice shot of the image of him, but I think the atmosphere, it's buzzing. That's a good word for it. I've been talking to people who are there on the ground, and they seem to be really excited about what's already happened, but more importantly, what's yet to come, because we have a tied match. It's not a player running away with it. Ding's previous match was also neck and neck with Jan Nepomniachtchi, so there's a lot of excitement.
Now Gukesh
ask the question. Here he is, Gukesh. He could become the youngest world champion in history. That couldn't be any more exciting. And for Ding Liren, there are a lot of people who are just wishing the best for him. They want to see that comeback. And it's funny because you say comeback. He hasn't lost the world championship title, but yet the last year.
Ναι, σε λιγότερο από 5 λεπτά. Σε λιγότερο από 5.
Right before the rest day.
Gukesh πήρε και θέση έτοιμος,
You mentioned that the last year hasn't been Ding's greatest. We've had examples before where world champion
Να και ο
World
Ding.
champions have been in slumps and then they've gone on to play the world championship match. A quick word, Judith, on whether we think a couple of draws here might actually be good for Ding and make Gukesh even more nervous, because Gukesh, coming into the world championship, maybe he was expected to be on better form.
Well, we can speculate what is the strategy of Ding in the match, but of course, we also see that Gukesh is extremely stable. He's losing a game, he's going to say roughly the same very confident things. If it's a draw, he's going to say the same thing. If he's winning, he has a much bigger smile on his face, and he's saying similarly. You can see his strengths, his stability. So going back to Ding, I think it's a very big question what he has prepared for the next game
Για να δούμε
here,
τι έχει
because
προετοιμάσει,
we
ναι.
also see that the opening does matter. Even if for non-professionals, it seems like it's nothing special. A pawn move here, g4, a pawn move there, h3. The other one is a5, which we've seen some of the critical moves in game 1, 2, and 3. But it does make the opponent think, and they think a lot, and in that case they can get in time trouble and time issues, as we've seen for Ding. It was part of this match very seriously. So I'm very curious what his strategy in the opening right now, and also in his mindset, whether is he okay to go for a draw or not.
Welcome for
All
the
right,
FIDE
ladies and gentlemen,
World
this is
Championship.
Maurice Ashley introducing us to round 4. Let's listen in.
At the Aquarius Hotel at the luxurious resort World Sentosa in beautiful Singapore. I am Maurice Ashley, and it is my distinct pleasure and special privilege to introduce the two gladiators who will be competing for title of World Chess Champion. First, the challenger from India, Gukesh Dommaraju. And the world champion from China, Ding Liren. The match is currently tied at 1.5, 1.5. The players have played fantastic fighting chess, regaling fans.
Έχουν πρόβλημα στην εικόνα, νομίζω. Έχουν πρόβλημα στον ήχο και την εικόνα, νομίζω. Τον βλέπω να μιλάει και να μην ακούγεται.
And this match, this much anticipated match, has truly lived up to its billing. We have had a treat so far. And we have a special treat today. Two trailblazers, role models, mentors, and ambassadors of the sport who will make the ceremonial first move. First, she made history in 1993 when she became the first woman from Asia to gain the title of Grand Master. She is currently a FIDE vice president and the president of the Chinese Chess Association. In 2019, she was inducted into the World Chess Hall of Fame. She is a 4-time women's world champion from China, Grandmaster Tia Shun. And from another chess superpower, he is currently deputy president of FIDE. In 1988, he became the first man or woman from India to gain the title of Grand Master. He is a 2-time World Cup winner, and he is almost single-handedly responsible for inspiring a generation of Indian superstars as they have scaled the mountaintop of world chess, including one of players here today. Indeed, a great talent, following in the footsteps of this man, a 5-time world champion from India,
Για να δούμε πάνω, για να δούμε. Έλα, πάμε.
With that, let the game begin.
All right, thank you very much, Maurice. 9 world
να το
championships
ρε,
between the
τι.
two players who've just made the ceremonial first moves, by the
Okay.
way. So, you know, pretty big stuff. Although, Robert, I can't help but wonder, just once,
Ανδρέα, έπεσες μέσα.
especially because we've got white and black making a ceremonial first move now, can we get like E3, E6 in there just once, just for the memes? That would be great.
You mean they should just start playing a little Bong Cloud? I don't think that's going to happen on this
Oh,
grand
man.
stage. They have such respect
Όπα,
for the game.
epsilon.
But at least the move that Gukesh trotted out, it's the same that he had Vishy play. So D5,
Okay.
black's first choice, but a different opening from the white side. But we do have your E3 there.
Exactly right. I just in case I accidentally manifest anything else in this game, I should
Να
absolutely
δούμε τι έχει
bow out at this
ετοιμάσει
point
εδώ.
and leave it to the experts.
Κινέζος.
Judith, quick, over to you before I see E6 on the board as well.
Well, I'm very curious what will come out of this opening after knight f3 and e3, but we are seeing something new again in game 4.
We definitely are, Judith. We have a different opening this time around, and it's Gukesh
Epsilon 3,
who's on the clock. In game 3, Gukesh with the white pieces, he played a sharp line that got Ding Liren's bishop trapped later on, and Ding, he was the one uncertain. It's not like this is some kind of sharp opening, right, Judith? At this early turn, it's just the second move of the game. What Gukesh is really doing is just thinking, what does Ding Liren want from me?
Yes, of course.
Κατευθείαν.
We all know who are or were professionals that before the game we tend to think about and prepare about all kind of different kind of openings. And when we go to the board, then suddenly we are going to have to deal with only one problem, one challenge. And in a World Championships match, it is
Μάλιστα.
escalated to a much different level. The same thing that, of course, Gukesh was preparing against e4, how to fix the little issues and problems and the things he was facing in game 2. But of course, expecting something different, that Ding will be changing his strategy, and instead of e4 goes for knight f3, he goes for Catalan or he goes for something else. So it is something that you have to switch your mind right now. So the first 10 minutes or so, first few moves, it's about adjusting themselves to that mindset, that what is actually happening on the board, and then forget everything what they were worried or prepared before the game.
And we, of course, will dive into the X's and O's in a bit as more of this game develops. But Judah, I guess the broader
φαίνεται να έχει
question
αυτοπεποίθηση
is,
σήμερα
how
ο,
much are they setting the tone
ο
for
Ding.
future games? Like, is Ding Liren playing this kind of quiet opening for now to make future Gukesh?
Ήδη τον έβαλε λίγο σε
games
σκέψη
from now
τον
wonder,
Gukesh.
Okay, he's played 2 different openings. Now it's a third white game for Ding. Is it just like a guessing game at that point?
Well, it is a very difficult thing to say, I believe, because as we talked before, match itself is a different kind of mental game than a tournament itself. And it is something new to Gukesh. I'm sure he was preparing and talking a lot about players like Anand, who is very experienced in match play. How does it work? What is the strategy? What is the mindset? What is the psychology of a match and the World Championship match? And of course, it's always different. But the value of surprising your opponent, the value of making doubts in your opponent's mind, it is much, much more important than in a tournament. And I think this is what's going on, this psychological battle that so far both players know that in the third round of repeating in colors, it can happen.
Τώρα τον έχει κάνει να σκέφτεται πώς θα βγει από την προετοιμασία του.
So you have this insecurity in yourself, that what to expect, memorizing a lot of options, a lot of ideas, a lot of lines before the game. And of course, the players will get tired from game after game after game. The tension is rising. And of course, they have to adjust always accordingly how the result is happening in the match.
That's a really good point there by you, Judith. And we have a zoomed-in look on Gukesh right now. He does look as determined as ever. And we can see
Καλημέρα, Γιώργο.
many moves have been played. He is just trying to figure out how this game, at least how he wants it to proceed, but he's also trying to anticipate how Ding Liren wants it to go. For example, just to draw
Ναι, κάτι περίεργο είχε ετοιμάσει ο Liren και τώρα προφανώς προσπαθεί να σκεφτεί ο Gukesh πώς θα βγει από αυτό. Τώρα ας πούμε, ύπος Ήτα 4, Ζήτα 5 είναι top κινήσεις, Ήτα 6, ε6, ενδεχομένως να σκέφτεται κάτι ακόμα πιο σπάνιο. Ίσως γάμα 5.
Exactly, and I remember when I was a younger player and I had the image of being very sharp and very concrete. People liked very much playing these kind of solid
Πάντως
moves,
το 5 λεπτό έφυγε για τον
E3,
Gukesh.
E3, knight F3, like it goes very slowly. You don't know exactly which move comes next. It's a positional thing. It's not going to be
Ο
something
Ding έπαιξε
concrete.
σχεδόν
And I think
αμέσως.
this is
Σχεδόν.
what it's important in Ding's strategy now. That he does not want to go into sharp things. He does not want to go into very concrete things because that would be a much more comfortable territory for Gukesh, I believe. So Gukesh is now thinking, okay, should I be playing c5? What setup to choose? Of course, the game it shows that it's going to be a long game. It's going to be a battle, a real battle. But of course, he has to figure out how he sets up his pieces, his pawn right now.
Που είναι ο δεύτερος.
It shows the mindset for me of Ding that
κάτι θα αναλύσανε, κάτι εχθές που είχαν και το ρεπό. Θα ετοιμάσαν κάτι ωραίο, πιστεύω. Για να δούμε πώς θα απαντήσει ο Gukesh.
We'll have to answer is where does this light square bishop belong? Because in an innocuous looking position, sometimes you just put your bishop on.
Μίλησα με τον Κινέζο και του είπα οποιοδήποτε φινάλ για να προκύψει να το παίξει σήμερα.
It's not really a risk to play either of those moves, but I would say that in some positions, especially with bishop to g4.
Πάντως του είπες τι άνοιγμα να παίξει, από ό,τι βλέπω, Ανδρέα. Του είπες ρέτη και έπαιξε ρέτη.
Are Ding Liren's strengths? There are many of them, but do I mind giving my opponent a potential bishop pair later on, or should I play something like you said, Judah, with c5 and play perhaps more ambitiously in the center? If your opponent is playing on the flank, oftentimes they allow you to take the center with your pawns, but this is not exactly scary because it's just the early stages. So Judith, I mean, these are difficult questions even for the World Championship challenger to answer, and Gukesh, he is spending time, and we know that time can be very precious in this match because they do not get increment, no bonus time added with every move until they reach the second time control on move 40.
Yes, time, we always talk about it, how important it is, as we've seen in game 3, that Ding Liren had not only a bad position, but also stepped over time, which is not very often in a World Championship match. Time is a very, very important part of chess, and people tend to neglect it or underestimate it when the changes were in the chessboard with the time change that after every move people were receiving bonus time. There was a long time when almost every tournament was played like this. And the World Championship now, and I think already the last one, they changed it that only from move 41 they are going to be receiving after every move 30 seconds. But it means that the players has to be much more.
Ήδη από την τέταρτη κίνηση δεν έχουμε πάρα πολλές παρτίδες σε αυτό το άνοιγμα. Μία σε μεγάλο επίπεδο βλέπω είναι Wesley So με Anis Giri. Από πού είναι αυτό? Meltwater, Tour Final το 21. Κέρδισαν τα μαύρα με αυτό. Και τι έπαιξε εδώ ο Μάστορας? Τα 6, Το ξέρει μάλλον. Όχι μάλλον, σίγουρα το ξέρει.
Look at this move. I mean, we're only getting on the camera now, but bishop a3, Judith. So,
μα είναι δημοφιλέστερης αυτό, ναι. Την ξέρουν και οι δύο την παρτίδα κατά πάσα πιθανότητα. Νομίζω ότι την ξέρουν και οι δύο.
Would have been met by knight h4. This is what I was highlighting it a little bit ago, that the white gets to take the bishop pair, and at the highest level, they often value the bishop pairs, though Vishwanathan Anand, he still is known, because he still plays great chess, he loves his knights, but this would have secured the bishop pair for white, still early stages, it's not like it's a risky decision from the black side, but still, Judith, they would have secured the bishop pair. So in the game, h6 was played to give that bishop a retreating square. But Judith, have you
Τώρα
ever
η πως
seen
β δέλτα 7
Judith
είναι
play
η κίνηση
free
που έχει
before
παιχτεί
in
σε
this
όλες τις
game?
παρτίδες.
No, I'm also kind of surprised. The first
Ενδεχομένως
thing
σκέφτεται
comes
κάτι
to mind
διαφορετικό
that
τώρα
probably
ο
it's
Gukesh για να βγει
second
τελείως από την προετοιμασία. Και θα
to
έχουμε καινούργια
idea.
παρτίδα από την πέμπτη
Rapport is
κίνηση.
famous for all
Αυτό θα έχει
kinds of
ενδιαφέρον.
unexpected moves like this. So I have a feeling that the Richard's hand is in this preparation as well. Very unusual. So the idea is, I guess, that
Ανάγαμε
first of all,
6.
black cannot play c5 to start with. And if black is going to push the e-pawn, then there is an exchange, and then the king cannot castle.
Με αυτό βέβαια.
Of course, artificially, that with extra moves, it can get there. The king, I mean, after e6,
το ίδιο σκεφτόμουν ακριβώς και δεν είχα δει καν αυτό. Για να δούμε.
But we are already seeing something original, something little unusual, and we are just in move 5, right? So this is what
Κατά πάσα πιθανότητα δεν θα
chess is
παίξει
about
πως
these
β
days,
δέλτα 7
that
το
how can you
ξέρει.
surprise
Θα
your
παίξει κάτι
opponent,
καινούριο.
not necessarily that you're going to get a great advantage, but you make a surprise, you analyze at home, you know the ideas, you just change a little bit, but it means that your opponent will spend a lot of time on that because it has to be taken care of, right? Black has to take decisions. Should he go maybe even g5 and go bishop g7? Of course, he will not play g6 with having the bishop on f5. Or is he really going to go e6 and then no big deal, but okay, then he's going to spend extra 10 pieces for castling? Or should he go knight bd7 and try to play c5? But after c5, usually the knight wants to be on c6. So there are small details about it, and in every move you can spend 5-10 minutes, and it can eat up your time.
And Judith, you just discussed a number of different
Το
variations,
φιανκέτο
and that is exactly
έχει ιστορία από
what
πίσω
is
του
going
που
through
έπαιξε
Gukesh's mind.
ο
This
φιανκέτος.
is the line I should play, or is that he has not seen this before? I strongly believe that, as you mentioned, Richard Report, the second for Ding Liren, he came up, he
Καλημέρα,
cooked
Δημήτρη.
at home, and now he's like, look at Gukesh, looking away from the board, trying to understand what his opponent and his team of seconds want out of this position. And you mentioned g5, and what Gukesh said after the first game is g4 when he was white is not a move you play without preparation. You disagreed with that because you're known for throwing your pawns forward and being ambitious. But g5, maybe it's a viable option, but perhaps by Gukesh's earlier statements, it's not a move that he would want to play without being thoroughly prepared.
Yes, of course, I mentioned it because as an alternative, and if you're at home preparing, obviously you may look at this kind of move, especially in preparation using the engines these days. It can be a very natural and a move that you consider.
Λοιπόν, πιθανολογώ κάτι τέτοιο. Δεν νομίζω ότι θα παίξει ε6 και να πάμε σε κάτι τέτοιο. Δεν νομίζω. Κάτι τέτοιο. Και να σηκώθηκε ο Ding, μάλιστα.
But I can't say that necessarily it's good. So the thing is that at this point with g5, whether it's good or not so good, you're not sure that you're going to be choosing this direction at such an early stage of the game. So this is the dilemma for Gukesh right now, that which direction to go in. Probably in the middle game, he may be choosing such a move in a much more comfortable and more confidence. But now he has to think that, well, probably it's better if I play more solid with black, game 4. But I'm very curious how he's going to be continuing.
Η λογική λέει ότι και αυτό είναι μέσα στην προετοιμασία του Liren.
Because for Gukesh, some difficult decisions lie ahead. The first thing that Judith pointed out for all of us is that if black
κι όμως έπαιξε ε6,
you capture on f8. And no matter how black captures back, you lose the right to castle. So king takes f8, sure, the king seems safe enough for now, but it takes some time to get the rook on h8 back in the game. You can see the evaluation bar saying,
όχι, δεν έπαιξε, τι λέω. Από αυτούς το είδα.
But it's far more comfortable, at least psychologically speaking. So e6,
δεν μπορώ να το κάνω,
not what you want. And Judith, the other main idea that you mentioned, knight d7, trying to go for c5, I think that white could even consider striking with c4, and then black has this annoying problem again. You want to play e6, but then bishop takes bishop on f8 and castling won't be the most natural or easiest. And if you play c6, well, didn't you want to just play c5? So you can't really accomplish both at the same time. So it's not the biggest deal in the world, at least not at this individual moment, Judith, but these decisions, they really take time to figure out for Gukesh. And we see Ding Liren, he's back there eating, he's snacking, and he's making sure that he is fully energized for the battle ahead.
Yes, it's kind of a good
He's
sign for
snacking.
him that he feels comfortable. He knows exactly what's going on. He's under control so far in the position. And probably he's kind of happy to surprise at such an early stage his opponent by playing bishop a3. I was just wondering, that after bishop a3, is it possible to play c5 anyway?
Oh,
Just
okay,
to
so
say,
I'm just going to bite.
okay, you take
I'm
it.
gonna do it.
What else?
You
right?
know I'm gonna take it. I want you to show me, what ambitious play you have in store.
I had in mind just simply to play queen c7, attacking the bishop, and then later on push it with b6, so the c2 pawn can be under attack.
Going right. See, I am scared about the c2 square with the bishop because in game 3 that was Ding Liren's downfall. So what if I move back? You're just going to take on c2 with... I guess you walk into a pin if you take with
Κάτι
the
τέτοιο.
bishop. Queen c1.
Well, probably it's overestimating my
Okay.
options here with playing
Οπ,
c5,
έπαιξε.
because I do get
Και
back
έπαιξε
the
τελικά
pawn,
την
but I still have a
τη
very
μοναδική
good
κίνηση που έχει
position with
ξαναπαιχτεί,
queen c2.
Μετά από
Probably
σκέψη
just
αποφάσισε να
capturing
συνεχίσει.
and
Οκ.
then playing knight
Το
c7.
περίμενα.
White has a beautiful position.
Για να δούμε τώρα.
Knight b5 ideas, and if you leave that bishop
Λοιπόν, στην
there
παρτίδα
too
με
long,
τον Σο,
joke
εδώ
aside,
παίχτηκε
that bishop will get trapped with
γάμα
b3,
4.
and it's not getting out from the c2.
Έχει και άλλες 4
Okay, so
παρτίδες που
this
παίχτηκε
was
ροκέ
morning joke.
και μία που παίχτηκε δέλτα 4.
With knight bd7 play, supporting the idea of c5.
You know, Judith, what's interesting about that c5 pawn sacrifice, which we now know hasn't happened, is sometimes when players are
Για να δούμε τώρα θα
uncomfortable,
παίξει ο
even
Liren.
at this great stage of the World Championship, they do make a move that lashes out, that they're like, at least I have some play and I feel a little bit more confident, because sitting passively, not that that's what Gukesh is doing, can be greatly challenging for these top players when they feel like their opponent is in a comfort zone, maybe playing for 2 results. It's too early to talk about a specific result, but the point is that a move like c5, a move like eventually allowing white to capture on f8 and black doesn't get the castle, as long as you get some activity, I think players tend to feel a little bit better about that than sitting quietly and just waiting for what the opponent is brewing.
Well, activity is very important. The higher level you go, the more the players will give for having an active play. Most of the players or top players, they would give even a pawn for that, to have activity with their pieces, right? To have their great location, winning time. And of course, it means if you can have your pieces very active, as in most of the games you will see in Gukesh's games, it can serve you well. That's clear. I also always loved when my pieces are very active, and I was ready to give sacrifices for that. And but for now, of course, things are going very slowly. I was wondering that probably d4 can be the next move. What do you think? Stopping black from playing e5?
Ναι, γιατί...
E and c5. And,
αυτό.
before I respond to that question, I'm
Τέλος
sorry,
πάντων, για να
I'm
δούμε.
going to throw one back to you. Are you surprised that Ding hasn't moved yet? I mean, knight d7 is a very logical reply to bishop a3, so why
Ναι,
do you
όντως
think
θα περίμενες ότι θα
Ding
παίξει
has
γρήγορα.
paused at this moment? I mean, he must have studied this exact position at home.
Καλά, σίγουρα την έχει προετοιμάσει. Απλά σκέφτεται τη
Maybe there
συνέχεια.
are several options which he considered that he can play. D4 is possible, C4 is possible immediately as well, and it gives a little
Ίσως κάνει
different
ροκέ.
game, I believe.
Πάντως όλα τα παιχνίδια τους
For now,
προσπαθούν
of
να
course,
βγάλουν
Ding
από την
has
τρίτη,
a lot
τέταρτη
of
κίνηση
balance.
κινήσεις
He can
αμφισβητούμενες.
think. I
Ναι, για
think
να
he
βγεις
would
και
be
να βγεις,
playing
προσπαθείς να βγεις από την
immediately,
προετοιμασία του
more
αντιπάλου σου, ας
the
πούμε.
importance of
Και από την άλλη μεριά τώρα ο Liren,
he shows to his opponent that
με αυτήν
I'm
εδώ
in
την
control,
κίνηση
I'm prepared,
που έπαιξε ο
I know
Gukesh,
what I'm
σαν να του
doing.
λέει, Gukesh, ξέρω
But
τι
maybe
κάνεις,
he's just going to
ξέρω
take
που
1
είμαστε.
or 2 minutes and then
Οπότε
he's
εδώ,
going to be
σου λέει τι
deciding
γίνεται.
and making his move. Of course, you're absolutely right. Knight
Βέβαια, ο
d7
Gukesh
is
εδώ
not
δεν έπαιξε
a
κίνηση για να
surprise.
βγάλει τον Liren από
It
προετοιμασία.
was
Έπαιξε τη
most
μοναδική
likely
κίνηση που έχει
to
παιχτεί σε αυτή τη θέση και
continue
τελικά κάνει
that
ροκέ
play
αυτό που
because
σκέφτηκα.
it
Οκ.
gives the option for c5 and d5 as
Οπότε
well,
ακόμα
which
έχουμε
also very
παρτίδες.
tempting.
Στην παρτίδα σο με γκύρι παίχτηκε γ4. Okay. Τώρα έχουμε ροκέ λοιπόν, που δεν είναι καινούργια κίνηση, έχει ξαναπαιχτεί. Αλλά όχι σε τόσο υψηλό επίπεδο. Έχει βέβαια 4 παρτίδες. Στη μία έχουμε γ5 και στην άλλη ε6. Για να δούμε τώρα. Θα παίξει κάτι από τα δύο Gukesh ή θα πάμε σε καινούργια παρτίδα?
Sometimes that's more uncomfortable for the opponent because when you commit to a certain pawn push, at least now we know what territory we're in. But because Ding has yet to play d4, a move that you mentioned, or c4, a very natural reply as well, perhaps it's just going to cause Gukesh to spend that little bit extra time right now trying to process what's going on.
Well, so far Gukesh was not spending incredibly a lot of time, but at least it's a good start for Ding to show that.
Εντάξει, έχει ξοδέψει 5 λεπτά ο Liren και 11 λεπτά ο...
I surprised you again.
Όχι 11.
And we can say that this is out of the 4 game, 4 times we've seen surprises. So all the players who are playing with the white color, they do make the surprises towards to their opponent, which is already a small gain in the beginning of the game. And we'll see whether it will be further little psychological gains for Ding, but this is definitely a good start. It was the same story in game 2, where he posed little problems and inconvenience position for Gukesh. The only thing is that Gukesh solved it very well, how to handle it. But so far, they are well prepared and they know somehow how to surprise the opponent, which is very important.
It is critical in this kind of match environment. And Judith, I know it's early for you, at least in terms of the time zone, but you're always a fighter. I know that. So I'm going to ask
το
the
γ5
question.
οδηγεί σε γ4, το ε6. Εντάξει, το ε6 έχουμε την ανταλλαγή εκεί.
Or is Ding Liren goading Gukesh, saying, come on, make that move. Knight d7, step 1, c5, step 2. Let's bring up an analysis board because I do want to ask, c5 seems to be on the agenda, but as you pointed out, the black knight on d7 would prefer to be behind that pawn on c6 to challenge more for the center. But is there an immediate drawback that you see for black playing the move c5?
Όπα, ε6.
e6 on the board. Gukesh played that. C5.
Okay, έχουμε την ανταλλαγή.
I think probably white would be going
λογικά με τον ύπο θα φάει τώρα. Δεν έχει ποιον εδώ πέρα που να επιλύεται. Οπότε θα φάει με τον ύπο. Ναι, έφαγε με τον ύπο.
Good circumstances, white can exchange the pawns on d5 and on c5. But we see that Gukesh went very solid with e6.
Yeah, just to quickly make that point, I guess
Λοιπόν,
if c4
δεν έχουμε ακόμα καινούργια παρτίδα βέβαια.
Position like this, maybe white can even take on d5 and play for an isolated queen pawn after d4.
Και τώρα έχουμε ή δ4 ή γ4.
So I agree with you there. I think Gukesh also foresaw that possibility.
γ4 τελικά.
Black takes back after the capture on f8 with the knight, and now c4. So at least black retains the right to castle, but white strikes relatively quickly while the black king remains in the center of the board. There isn't going to be a checkmating attack. To my eyes, Jude, I don't quite see it yet. Sometimes you see a pawn go forward and there are possibilities beyond that. But the position, it's very tame at the moment. So all that's been traded...
Είναι μέσα στην προετοιμασία του Ding, εντάξει, προφανώς.
What do you believe Ding is really aiming for at this stage? Because what's the exact plan?
Indeed, it seems like a very solid position that now we exchanged the black square bishops already. It became very different, I believe. I would think that there are several ideas for white. It could be, first of all, the question is where black is going to be moving his knight from f8. Is he going to move forward to g6 and keep it there and castle, or which I would think it's more logical to go back to d7 where it came from, because somehow it will be better placed, supporting c5 and stuff like that. At the same time, I'm thinking whether white will...
Θα δώσω πω ότι φαίνεται σε βαράντες που η βασίλισσα έρχεται εδώ, ας πούμε, και παίρνει τον έλεγχο αυτής της διαγώνιου. Τώρα που δεν υπάρχει μαύρο τετράγωνος.
Of course, time will be an
Λοιπόν,
important
τι
part
έπαιξε?
how White's setup will be
28,
because
δέλτα
even I
7.
can visualize if let's
Οκ,
say knight d7
πήγε
is on
πίσω.
the board. So to play knight c3 and playing b4 at some
Υπάρχει
point
μια
with white,
παρτίδα εδώ, η
maybe it's
πόσο γάμα 3
crazy after
είναι
c takes
η
d5
κίνηση που
and
έχει
white can
παιχτεί,
place
συνεχίζει
his
την
knight to
ανάπτυξη, λογικό μου
b4,
φαίνεται. Α,
pushing away the
και αυτό
white
κάνει
square
convert στην παρτίδα
but
αυτό
maybe
του
white
show
will
με του
just
Γκύρι,
play with d4 playing knight c3 bringing the queen to d2 b2
με
and
αυτή τη
little
σειρά
space
κινήσεων.
advantage.
Οκ.
And that's how he wants to play. But there is very little so far. So in the next 5 moves, we should be seeing how much or if
Ναι.
any advantage or pleasant position will be for Ding.
I enjoyed the
Μάλλον την
ideas
ξέρουν
that
και οι
you were
δύο την
sharing
παρτίδα,
there. The
υποθέτω.
queen may go to c1 and up to b2, or just to try to fight for the center, sort of fianchetto the queen. Knight c3 followed by pawn to b4 to get that queen off of the d1 square and develop it on that diagonal that would be opened up.
Για να δούμε τι θα παίξει τώρα
But
ο
it
Liren.
feels quite like little at the moment. He's playing for small pluses is Ding, and I do like this knight d7 move, right? Knight g6 would feel more ambitious, but if I'm going to just hover the knight to g6, that bishop on f5 loses retreating squares, and maybe then that's what Ding would have tried to go after that bishop with your knight d4 idea in the near future. So a knight d7, it feels more stable. The knights are protecting one another, not that they really need it. Every single piece that could be attacked, at least in the immediate future, is safe and sound from Gukesh's perspective. So I like your b4
Κάνω μια
idea.
fast forward αυτή την παρτίδα ενώ
Maybe taking on d5 first would be appealing to me because at least I changed the pawn structure. I don't just want this symmetrical game.
για κάποιο λόγο είχε δώσει
I'm not going to get all that
ο
much.
Wesley τη διαφορά.
Taking on d5 first, if we can quickly bring up an analysis board just to show the change in pawn structure, that if c takes d5,
Και γι' αυτό
e takes
έχασε
d5,
κιόλας.
and then
Οκ.
b4, no, I feel maybe I'll get a little bit something. A pawn minority attack in the future. This queen coming out to b3, knight to c3, rook to c1.
Ναι, αυτό Δημήτρη
Several of my next
είναι η
moves,
κίνηση που
they
έχει παιχτεί σε
feel
αυτή την παρτίδα.
natural and obvious, and maybe I'm just getting
Ο Liren προφανώς το έχει προετοιμάσει. Ο
guessing.
Gukesh φαίνεται ότι γνωρίζει τη θέση, αλλά δεν το έχει προετοιμάσει προφανώς. Οπότε θα πάει εκεί τώρα ο Liren ή θα πάει σε κάτι τελείως διαφορετικό. Το οποίο θα είναι στην προετοιμασία του ή θα είναι τώρα αυτοσχεδιασμός.
Because
Για να δούμε.
after a5, if black would be pushing a5, then black can push b5, right? That was probably your plan. And so this will not give too good things for black, I believe. But if white can stabilize the position after b4 to play knight c3, to put the queen on b3, to possibly go even a4 and gain more space, keep the knight on d4, it can be a pleasant position for white, I believe. But also after c takes d5, there is an option that black would be capturing it with the knight. So this way keeps away the b1 knight from a good developing square of c3 because white doesn't want to exchange everything, right? But we shouldn't ignore the fact that black did nothing wrong in this position so far. He played very healthy. He made very logical developing moves. So he's just having a very reasonable, very, very healthy position, which is very important. But of course, after c takes d5, again, it's a moment for making a decision for Gukesh. And this is what we're going to see all the time, that they are posing different kind of questions where the players has to make decisions to go here, this way or that way, this structure or that structure.
Μπορεί και
So
να φάει και
those
εδώ.
little things are
Αλλά αυτό είναι το
happening
πιο λογικό.
from move to move in this game.
It's a game of just little decisions. They may not seem so consequential, but they do add up and they may force your opponent to spend some of that precious time. But right now it's Ding Liren on the clock. He has yet to make his decision.
Να δούμε ποιος από τους δύο λευκοτετράγωνος θα καταστραφεί πρώτος. Για να δούμε. Εκτός αν καταστραφούν ταυτόχρονα. Και μείνουν με τους ύπους.
Giri had the black side against Wesley So in the Meltwater Finals in 2021. And
στην παρτίδα αυτή
this
είχε φύγει το
was the choice of Wesley. And also Yasser
του μαύρου.
instead of knight f8 to d7.
Τον έδωσε για
Yasser
αυτό
had
τον
this
ύπο.
position from the black side, putting his pawn on c6, and that game was played in 1978. So Yasser Seirawan, a good friend of pretty much everyone in the chess world, but he had this position from the black side way back when.
Well, that's interesting. And c6 is a different approach, defending and strengthening the center on d5. So if white wants to take on d5, definitely, or that's what I would think, that he had an idea to capture it back with the c pawn, a little bit the Slavish structure. This can be played, but this is more straightforward, more Gukesh style to play knight d7 to keep the pawn on c7, I think, and leave an option to play c5. While I'm looking at this position, what do you think about an idea? I think possibly at some point it can be, before white playing d4, that knight d4, for example, and after bishop moving away to h7 to play f4.
Τώρα τι έπαθε ο Liren, δεν είναι στην προετοιμασία του.
I'm definitely a fan of ideas like that, except when I play them, they usually backfire, because then, well, black will play a move like c5 or e5 with tempo, and then I regret my decision making. But I'm into it. I truly am. I think that it would be ambitious play. I don't know if Ding Liren, he wants to do that here, especially if he hasn't studied that specific line. And I get the feeling that he was playing for the ever so slight plus rather than the let me go all out and try to go for the king side. I think that there are some strategic risks that he probably would want to avoid. And while I say all that, I know John has been waiting. He's been anxiously watching these opening moves, seeing the stability rather than the chaos. Yeah. John, it's kind of quiet right now in the playing hall in Singapore.
It is a little bit. I was looking forward to the chaos. You're right. It does seem to ring out as stability just that little bit more. One thing I have noticed, though, that maybe is worth speculating on, and I know we love speculation here, but it's all good fun in the opening, is that Judith, previously when we've seen preparation come out from these players, it tends to prompt these long thinks in the opening, and so far at least, one player has always been down by quite a lot of time. In this instance, it was Ding Liren who played bishop a3. Feels like to us that he's relatively prepared for what's going on, but he's the one thinking, and he's only 5 minutes ahead on the clock. Can we read into that at all?
Well, maybe we can say that this is the first game where in time they are very close to each other, even though that Ding made a surprise to Gukesh. But Gukesh was able to handle it very quickly. He didn't have to think too much of his time. It was basically strategic questions, how and which way and which direction he's going. I think he starts to get into this match mood where I'm pretty sure that the experienced 5-time world champion Anand, who is very close to Gukesh, was telling some ideas that the world championship match is very long. It's 14 games, so you don't have to burn bridges. You can go slow and very modest. Look after your pieces, and if you can choose in the very early stage in the opening, very sharp or very modest when you get a surprise, obviously it's good to consider to go solid. And this is what Gukesh is doing. You can see that he was handling this challenge very comfortably so far.
And Robert, there's almost something else implied in that as well, which is if Ding Liren has played something that's a little bit unexpected,
80% Liren,
and Gukesh has
20
responded quite
Gukesh,
quickly,
okay.
And he's showing that he's settling into the match, saying, look, I don't have that much experience in match play. I'm also the challenger here. I'm not the world champion, but I'm more than capable of handling anything you can throw at me. That's the message he's telepathically saying to Ding Liren right now.
Well, Ding Liren may be the world champion, but I think all the markets had Gukesh as a sizable favorite heading into the match. So it's kind of weird. You typically think that the reigning champion should be the favorite, especially if they are relatively young and nothing too much has changed. But a lot has changed for Ding. And so he came into the 2023 match against Jan Nepomniachtchi as an equal. They were about level, I mean, by rating, and it went down to the wire. It was a hectic match indeed. They were trading wins and sufferings in some key moments. But for Ding, of course, since then, the storyline has been a tale of somebody who struggled mightily to find his footing, not just on the chessboard, but in the world. And he has, I think, hopefully turned a corner. He did win the first game of this match, and it does seem like his spirits generally have been on the rise. But for Gukesh, I think that storyline of he's new to match play, that's very true. He's so young. He's a teenager, but look at him. He's not just sitting there napping. He's sitting there getting into the mindset of, what does Ding want from me? How am I going to fight back against this move or that one? And I feel like he is just, I mean, his age belies his maturity. Gukesh is somebody who is stoic. He is super strong, and he may just be 18, but I believe he is truly ready to win a world championship title. Not that he necessarily will, but I think he has it within himself to know that this could very well be his time.
So both players very much dialed in at the moment and focusing on the position. Thank you very much for that, Robert. It's interesting to see where Ding Liren wants to take this next. We are going to go to a brief break, our first of the broadcast. But before we do, just as a reminder to you guys,
αυτή η μουσική που βάζανε, ξέρω εγώ, μου βγάζει copyright.
Supporting the launch of Chess Up 2, which is the revolutionary smart chessboard that will change how you learn and play the game. You've got touch-sensitive pieces that light up the board, optional AI assistance as well, but Chess Up 2 meets you at your skill level and supports training and growth. It even lets you play chess.com bots on the board. And the Black Friday Savings Week is here with $70 off your Chess Up 2. So head over to go.chess.com/chessup2 or use !chessup in the chat to unlock this offer and take your game to the next level. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Το μικρό πλεονέκτημα χρόνου που είχε, το έχει δώσει σχεδόν ο Ding.
See you in a sec.
Has this ever happened to you?
Oh, shoot. Another mouse slip.
What about this?
Oh, well, holy bishops en passant. I think I'm getting carpal tunnel. If only there was a way to play online chess with a real-life board.
What if I told you you can with Chess Up 2?
Μπορεί να μην θέλει να παίξει προγραμματρία.
Right. With Chess Up 2, you can now play over the board.
Να κινήσει το ποιόν και να το φέρει Δέλτα 2, ξέρω.
Simply connect your chess.com account to our state-of-the-art Chess Up 2 and get a game started. Every time you move, our revolutionary board will transmit the data online directly to your opponent. And as soon as they move, squares will light up, signifying which piece is going where.
Well, shucks. This Hikaru guy seems pretty good.
With Chess Up 2, mouse slips and sore wrists are a thing of the past.
My carpal tunnel is gone. Well, this sure is fun. I'm playing online against my new friend Hikaru. Who needs a family? But I sure do miss clicking on a piece and seeing all of my available moves, like they have on chess.com.
Well, Danny, you're in luck. This feature is totally available on the Chess Up 2 as well.
Wow. Well, I'm convinced. But hey, what if I don't just want to play an opponent online? What if I want to use one of chess.com's other great tools?
I thought you'd never ask. With Chess Up 2, you can fully take advantage of the chess.com integration by playing bots, analyzing your offline games, and using our optional AI assistance to visualize the quality of moves with color-coded hints.
Well, holy Chess Up, you did it.
Προφανώς τώρα φοβάται, σου λέει, ξέρει ακριβώς τις κινήσεις ο Gukesh, τι θα κάνω, κάτι τέτοιο.
Play chess today on the board of tomorrow.
This is the Google Pixel 9 with Gemini. And this is Dan, suggesting some places to meet up and watch the game tonight. But you know what's better than a list of places? Knowing how close those places are. Which is why you're just going to ask Gemini to put these places on a map. Whoa, how's that for teamwork?
This December, the world's top chess minds clash in the heart of New York City at the FIDE World Rapid and Blitz Championship. Witness world number one Magnus Carlsen and other stars from across the globe Rapid and Blitz, chess in its most thrilling form, unpredictable and unforgettable. Fast moves, tactics and blunders, and moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Witness the pinnacle of chess excitement. Get your tickets now at worldrapidandblitz.fide.com.
Η Δευτέρα ξεκινάει και το ελληνικό πρωτάθλημα, από ό,τι βλέπω. Καλημέρα Σιμώ. Πάλι θα βγει με πίεση χρόνου, λέει, ακόμα στο άνοιγμα. Θέλω να πιστεύω πως όχι. Απλά τώρα μάλλον σκέφτεται τι εντελώς καινούργιο να παίξει. Δεν κατάφερε να βάλει τον Gukesh σε κάτι άγνωστο από ό,τι φαίνεται. Ο Gukesh γνωρίζει τη θέση. Αλλά προφανώς ο Liren, άμα την έχει προετοιμάσει, την ξέρει καλύτερα, οπότε θα πρέπει να είναι πιο confident.
Ding Liren may be showing a little bit of preparation here against Gukesh, but it's Ding who's settling in for a longer think at this point, and he's actually down on the clock now. That's worth discussing.
Yeah, the position is quiet, so it's not like they need all this time to figure out will there be a sacrifice or a checkmating attack. Perhaps Ding is just thinking, do I want this game to end?
Ευχαριστώ Σιμώ.
I don't think that
Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
draw, but he can just make sure that nothing exciting will happen if he so chooses.
So let's take a look here. We've had the knight, of course, go out to d7, capturing on f8. So Judith, crucially, keeping castling rights for black, and then calmly moving straight back to d7 and saying, here's your tempo. What do you want to do with it? And white has some decisions to make here.
Well, indeed, white has to make some decisions, not big ones, but strategic decisions, I believe, to play d4, to play c takes d5, to play knight c3, to go knight d4. And so he has to make a plan, and which is surprising to me that Ding is not, he did not make a decision beforehand. He didn't have a plan, or as it's not such a concrete position, probably he does choosing from the different plans, and he decided to go nice.
Ναι, πάλι. Και τελικά έπαιξε το αναμενόμενο, δηλαδή σκέφτηκε τόση ώρα για να παίξει το αναμενόμενο, αυτό περίεργο. Για δούμε τώρα τι θα παίξει ο Gukesh. Στην παρτίδα με το σο, του σο με τον Giri, ροκέ παίχτηκε εδώ. Και σε άλλη μία που υπάρχει, και υπάρχει και μία που παίχτηκε γάμα 6. Αυτές οι τρεις.
When there's symmetry, it means that you're fighting for the same files. It doesn't mean that you can just play and try to get some kind of ambitious idea. Oftentimes in a symmetrical position, it's just a quiet maneuvering affair. So for you, Judith, from your perspective, do you think that
ναι, Δημήτρη, και εγώ αυτό πιστεύω.
Like c6 and be ultra solid, or will he say castle first? I don't see tremendous risk in these decisions, but white may be preparing to take on d5, because as you mentioned, that if the knight were still on b1, black would just take back with the knight on d5 and keep that white knight at bay. Now that the knight is already out on c3, your ideas with b4 and queen b3, they definitely are at the forefront of my mind.
Yes, there are decisions to be made by Gukesh, but it's not such a huge ones, right? So, for example, even queen e7 is possible, just a little bit stopping white from thinking about moves like b4 in the near future. c5, it gives a completely different structure. I'm not sure how much Gukesh is so comfortable there. I think this is what Ding is aiming for. That after c5 he can capture on d5 and then to play d4 and hoping for an
Εντάξει, για την ώρα πάντως δεν υπάρχει διαφορά χρόνου. Εντάξει, στα 3 λεπτά δεν είναι κάτι.
And I think right now, really Ding is trying to steer the game in a position where Gukesh does not feel so comfortable. This is the main goal of Ding. It's not to get a
Ναι, αλλά δεν θα παίζει
great
γάμα 3.
advantage. No. That would be
Αν
a
ήθελε
horrible
αυτό που
mistake.
λέει.
And that's not the point. The point is that somewhere he can play and maneuver a long game
Αλλά πότε
and
όμως?
try to provoke his challenger a little bit and steer the game in a position where he just feels very good. I mean, this position, what we have on the analyzing board, I think it would be like a fantastic achievement for white. So this is the thing that Ding is trying to get the position
Όντως έκανε
he
ροκέ.
can enjoy himself.
Αναμενόμενο.
And Black is very
Εντάξει,
much
προφανώς και οι δύο
under
το
control,
γνωρίζουν.
castle, so they
Τώρα,
both developed,
Δέλτα 4 είναι η
this
κίνηση
style.
ή να φάει
That's why Knight
που έχουν
C3 was
παιχτεί.
kind of very logical
Μία από
and
τις
I
δύο.
believe,
Αλλιώς θα πάμε σε
important
καινούρια.
move.
Κάτι
So let's
καινούριο.
see how Ding is going to be continuing. I think he will withhold the move d4. Because after d4, Black can go knight e4, which is a great spot for his knight in many cases. And for this kind of structure, the knight on d7 stands perfectly fine because many times it can support the e4 knight with the knight d7.
Θα παίξει αυτό.
I'm with you there.
Ενδεχομένως.
D4 may be a bit premature. I'm not really sure, if not for d4 in the live position. I mean, c takes d5, I keep repeating it. I feel like a broken record that at least this changes up the pawn structure. It makes a small imbalance of having black with only one central pawn, white with two of them. So if we just show that c takes d5, black
Μετά έχει 2 εναντί 1 στο κέντρο, αλλά αυτός έχει
is just going to illustrate my
3
point.
εναντί 2
And
στη
then in a position
βασίλισσα.
like this, you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, that black has this c pawn, white does not have a c pawn, but white does have an e pawn instead. So we have at least an asymmetrical pawn structure with chances for white to play along the c file to get this queen out, maybe rook f to c1, and just hint at the queen side being advantageous for white.
Generally speaking, I quite like this kind of play with white to take on d5 and play b4. At the same time, maybe white wants to play more solid to go rook c1 immediately to keep the tension and still asking questions from Gukesh. Are you going to play c5 after all, or you want to really go to c6 or queen e7? It's also a possibility for white, I believe.
Yeah, I think I can tell by your tone you want the capture on d5. Like you're saying, let's get something going here. Maybe this will drum up some chances because in all reality, Judith, there is no risk for Ding to take on d5, right? And from Gukesh's perspective, these one move here, one move there, that's not what's going to cost these players the game. It's all about strategizing and coming up with something of a legitimate plan versus just making individual moves in a very balanced position at the moment. So I do think that if Ding is ambitious, if he is fresh off the rest day, looking to not just score a point. These top players, we know they don't just think, let me win the game. You can't be results oriented in a chess match.
Φαίνεται θα έχει πάλι πλεονέκτημα χρόνου ο Gukesh.
How the position has gone move by move. But I think if Ding Liren even has the slimmest of hopes to win, at some point he's going to have to make a decision that either changes the nature of this game or perhaps does what you said earlier with like a knight d4, pawn to f4, just throwing some pieces forward.
Yeah, I mean, knight d4, f4 I would like to have if I have an extra 3 tempo more, probably, then I would be more comfortable with that. So far, the most straightforward plan, I think, is still c takes d5 and b4. This is what something that comes to my mind. But I can be too concrete myself. I was not playing these kind of structures with white at all, and even with black, I was not really going into these kind of positions. It usually is very slow. that things are happening in a very slow manner. Move here, move there, maneuvering. You're placing your
Αυτό,
position there, and then
ναι.
little changes over
Για να τον
time.
ανταλλάξεις με
After
αυτόν,
d takes
αν
d5,
μείνει εκεί
he
βέβαια.
takes d5 and b4. White
Εντάξει,
has a
έχει
very
βέβαια,
straightforward
έχει αυτό.
plan to bring his queen to b3 to play a4.
Έχει τετράγωνο για να
play
αποφύγει την
e7,
ανταλλαγή,
king
εάν
takes to
θέλει.
c1, f1 rook. So that seems to be a very, very possible
Απλά αν
continuation
πάει πίσω μετά
for
δεν
white.
έχεις
So
κάπου να
this is a
πας.
big question, whether is he going to be playing solid, very solid, or just more active.
Μάλλον θα παίξει δέλτα 4. Θα συνεχίσει μάλλον. Δεν ξέρω πότε, ίσως το αλλάξει πιο μετά. Τόσο αν παίξει πύργο γάμα 1.
You know, this pawn on e3 it's really hard to get to. But after white plays b4 and does go forward with these plans on the queen side,
Αλλά
if black
εντάξει,
ever
οκ,
plays
δεν
c6,
κερδίζεις
we
κάτι.
can see white use this pawn minority attack
Και να
idea
παίξει
on
μετά
queen
δέλτα 4.
b5. So it does feel like, and we just saw Ding
Όπα,
capture
έφαγε.
b5. It does feel
Αχα.
like white does have a little
Έφαγε
bit
στο
more
δέλτα,
control of
στο δέλτα
the
5.
queen side than black will get of the center. The center seems very sturdy from
Και
Ding's
δεν τρώει με
perspective.
τον
So
ύπο,
this
τρώει με
does
το
look
πιόνι.
like he has played before. Judith, we may be in for. I'm going to speak for myself, excuse me.
Και τώρα
I
έχουμε αυτό
think
που
we're
λέγαμε,
for a
έχει
longer battle than
εδώ
I
στο κέντρο
initially
δύο
thought,
πιόνια
because
έναντι
I
ενός, αλλά
did
αυτός
think
έχει
that
τα
he might
3
allow
έναντι 2 εδώ στην
symmetry
τέργα
in
του
a
Βασίλισσας. Για να
peaceful
δούμε.
game. No, Ding
Το
Liren
οποίο
says, I'm
είναι
going
νομίζω
to
στην άλλη
go
παρτίδα.
with
Για να
these
δω.
ideas that we've been talking about, and now it's up to Gukesh to find the correct continuation.
Ναι, άρα δεν παίζει ότι
I'm gonna
έπαιξε στην
pass the
παρτίδα
baton over
ο
to
Έσλι
you.
Σόμε αν
If
είσαι
you
Γκύρι.
were handling this position
Παίζει
from the
την άλλη
black side,
παρτίδα.
I think a number of moves come to mind, but ultimately, what plan do you think that Gukesh is going to aim for?
Όπου εδώ είχε παιχτεί ύπος δέλτα
Well,
4.
first I want to say that I like the approach. I like it that Ding decided to take c takes d5 and b4 because it's a very straightforward decision and goes for some strategy, gaining space, which is very important in this kind of
Με επίθεση σε
game and
αυτόν.
structure. Black played just c6, which I think is the most
Αλλά όπα,
logical
παιχτήκαν
move,
άλλες
because
κινήσεις.
otherwise even
Τώρα
white
είδα,
could
λοιπόν.
have been thinking
Αχα.
about later on pushing b5.
Β4. Αυτή ήταν η πρόταση νομίζω του
So after
Stockfish.
c6, I think a5 is something that black considers at a later stage for sure. The queen most likely going
Οκ.
to be put
Είναι ακόμα μες στην προετοιμασία του Liren,
then
πιστεύω.
from f8 can support with
Γάμα
pawn
6.
c8, for example.
Ναι,
Of
γιατί
course,
θέλει
it
να
will
παίξει
be
Β5,
later
οπότε.
on decision
Γάμα 6. Τώρα ξαναπαίζουν λίγο πιο γρήγορα.
how to react after whether white plays b5 or when he plays b5, when he plays a4. Of course, I believe that after a4, for example, black will definitely go a5.
Και νομίζω έχουμε καινούργια παρτίδα, έτσι.
Black does not want to allow white to be pushing
Ναι.
the pawns a4, a5 and gaining space there. Because then it would be a very pleasant position
Όχι,
for white.
έχει παιχτεί ξανά.
So there, for example, it could be forcing matters immediately.
Όχι, δεν έχουμε ακόμα
A4,
καινούργια.
A5, B5, then black is keeping it that way. Or he also has an option to play already C5. And
Σέλσα
not
Β3
allowing
έχει
to
παιχτεί
exchange
εδώ.
between
Ύπος
pair
δέλτα
of pawns.
4.
Yeah, after b5, I think c5 is also quite a reasonable move. And because already here after d4, black can be pushing c4. And this is a lot different kind of position, so black will not have to play the isolated pawn. So this is why I believe
Και αυτό
white is not
φαντάζομαι μπορεί να
going to be
παιχτεί.
playing a4. But most likely he's going to be developing with his queen to b3. And rook c1, and of course after b4, white is time to time will consider to play knight d4 because it cannot be pushed away by playing c5, and the knight can be
Ναι, όντως
placed
έχει
very
άτυπο
well
στο
on
εδώ μετά από
d4,
αυτό δεν μπορεί
and
να
we
παιχτεί.
might see f4 also on the board, trying to play positionally, pushing, sometimes even thinking about f5 to close the power of the bishop on h7.
I'm just going to make a few moves, Judah, just to sort of emphasize that, because it's a really instructive thing that you're mentioning, that bishop h7, f4, it's an objectively good move, and at some point f5 shuts down that bishop and just completely puts it out of the game.
Τα μαύρα έχουν ε4, έτσι.
Yeah, so it can be going to this direction, but
Δηλαδή κάτι τέτοιο, ας
And
πούμε.
slowly white can get a very pleasant position if black is not paying attention and not reacting in time on things. So this is the big question for me, that after c6, how black will be playing fast enough and to react exactly the way he should, to not to allow everything for white to improve his position.
I think your point though about a4,
10 λεπτά η διαφορά. Είχε 10 λεπτά διαφορά εκείνους και τώρα έχει δώσει 10 λεπτά στον αντίπαλο. Ελπίζω να μην τον πάρει πάλι κάτω απόλυτα με τον χρόνο.
Whether I play a5 or throw in knight d4 first, I'm not sure it matters so much, but the point is that you mentioned this, Judith, a5 is like a clamp. Now white has all the space over there on the queen side, and even though the objective evaluation is slightly better for white, nothing too major, it's super unpleasant for black to play, because I was mentioning pawn breaks. You're not wanting to play c5 because after the capture, the b file opens up and b7 is a backwards pawn. You're not going to play b6 even if it didn't hang a pawn right away, because it loosens your control over both a6 and c6. So this would be an uncomfortable position. So black would strike back immediately in the event of a4 with Judith's a5. You don't want to allow black to capture on b4 and leave white with an isolated pawn, but b5 doesn't exactly prove satisfactory because c5, and now black is the one with control of a very important pawn break in the center. And if white goes for this move, then black pushes forward, I believe, with c4, and this clearly is good for black, Judith. So I think that whatever ambitions Ding may want, it's not going to be easy for him to make progress, and it's going to take some time. So while he is thinking, while he is trying to figure out in this live position what to do, why don't we take a look at how chess has evolved in his home country of China, because we know that there are so many stars from there.
Played chess for a millennia, but perhaps not the form you're familiar with. Xiangqi, or Chinese chess, is a fast, tactical form of chess with a river, castles, and cannon. Now in the last few decades, Western chess has exploded in China. Chinese success began in women's chess. 6 of the 11 women's chess champions since 1991 have hailed from China.
Κίνα,
In the past 33 years, a Chinese player has held the title of
Στις
women's world
γυναίκες είναι
champion
πρώτη.
for 24 of them. In 2023, Ding Liren became the 17th undisputed world chess
Ναι, και έχουμε
champion
και το Λιρ.
and the first Chinese player to hold that illustrious title. Ding may be the most accomplished Chinese grandmaster, but he is certainly not the only one. In fact, Wei Yi
Καλημέρα Βασίλη. Δεν έχω επίσημο έλο, γύρω στο 1800 περίπου, παίζοντας online.
is the reigning women's world chess champion, and the legendary Hui Fan is the highest rated woman in the world. China's chess legacy is great, but it is Ding Liren defending his throne, whom all eyes are on right now. Will he defend his title and keep the world championship in China?
Β5. Μπορεί να
There are
παίξει
so many
Β5.
superstars on the chessboard from China. Ding Liren, the world champion, he of course is chief amongst them. And Judith,
Μετά
there was a mention of Shang
παίζει αυτός Γ5.
I really enjoy that game. I've actually played
Και έχει ελεύθερο πιόν.
some others over the years, just for fun. I don't pretend to be any kind of expert.
Βασικά όχι, δεν είναι ελεύθερο, έχει στο Δ2.
I've seen it people playing when I was visiting China for educational chess purposes, but unfortunately I never tried to play it. It seems to be more complicated to me.
Πιθανότατα τη σκέφτεται και αυτή την κίνηση ο Liren τώρα. Σκέφτεται διάφορες.
But I know that in China it is very popular, and of course I was even in a small club or restaurant where everybody was playing, so it was very authentic. It was very nice. But I hope I can.
Εγώ θα παίζα Α4 μάλλον.
What is the magic in that game?
I think you have to approach it and just have fun, because what happened to me the first time I ever played.
Οι γνωστές είναι Βασίλισσα Β3 και Ήπος Δ4.
I'm going to challenge you to Chinese chess, and I'm here thinking, oh, it's pretty similar, but there's a river in the middle, there's a cannon that like jumps all over the place, over pieces. So it's a different game. Just have fun with it if you do try. But on the chess itself in China, I've only been once, and it was many years
Ακόμα δεν
ago
υπάρχει
now.
κάτι στην
But I
παρτίδα.
remember visiting a chess school and seeing how studious everyone was, but also just like how the coaches were loving, and they really provided, you know, binders of chess openings and positions, and really dedicated themselves to bettering all the students. I mean, what has your experience been like? You said you've visited before, and of course, it's now just they're brimming with excitement given that Ding Liren is playing this World Championship.
Well, the first time I visited China, it was quite a shocking experience from chess point of view, and it was like 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. You know, I was in a tour in different cities and giving simultaneous exhibitions and giving motivational talks and stuff like that, chatting with people, and I was treating these simultaneous exhibitions like if I would be in Europe or anywhere. And I was quite shocked because the interest was huge. There was like they were asking, instead of 20 boards, maybe can we do 30 boards or 35 or 40? I said, okay. At that time, I didn't understand how strong they can be. Only small kids and so on. So I was sweating crazily, I have to admit, and I never forget this very little girl playing against me with this ponytail, long hair, very seriously, and flashing out, you know, the Karakan main line until move 19 if I would be playing against Bari. and already then,
Καλημέρα,
you
Κωνσταντίνε.
know, I understood that something
Τι έγινε, τελείωσαμε
was
τις
going to
ελιές?
happen in the future.
Λες να πάει σου παλιά, θα δούμε, δεν ξέρω ακόμα. Πολλά μπορεί να γίνουν. Αυτό που δεν μου αρέσει είναι ότι πάλι το θέμα με τον χρόνο, ότι έχει αρχίσει ο Λίρεν να δίνει το προβάδισμα στον Gukesh.
And it is very organized how they can move forward and discover talents and also nurturing them.
Yeah, that story is one that I think many
Έπαιξε.
Have had the
Ναι, τελικά έπαιξε υπό Δέλτα 4.
experiencing when they're playing someone. Oh, it's just, you know, a kid. They
Το
seem
οποίο
so
ακόμα δεν είναι
innocent
καινούργια
and
κίνηση.
cute, and then they just immediately throw out all this theory, and you're like, okay, what is your rating? Because it should
Λοιπόν,
be much higher
χτυπάει τον
than
αξιωματικό.
what it is on paper. So that's a lovely experience. Thank you for sharing that with us, Judith. And well, you know, we're speaking chess, we're speaking China. Ding Liren,
Λογικά θα πάει πίσω τώρα, σε ένα από τα δύο.
World champion, open champion from China, and he plays knight to d4. So it's an idea that we had discussed earlier. He brings his knight to attack this bishop on f5. That's the direct threat. I guess the question is now for Gukesh, do you go all the way back, which is my first instinct in these positions, just get to safety, not in the line of fire from any of the other pieces. And even more important to me than where does Black put the bishop is White going to play f4, Judith? Do you think that Ding is going to push this golden pawn 2 squares forward to f4, or is he just going to move closer to the queen side?
I don't know how golden is that pawn, but it will be pushed to f4, I believe.
I
always appreciate that. You have no fear. You just throw the pawns forward. I'm like, but what if it actually creates a weakness in the center and then I can't deal with it? You know, those are the thoughts going in my mind.
Έχω ακόμα, αλλά βρέχει σήμερα. Θα έχω μέχρι να βγει ο νικητής. Οκ.
The f pawn are so important to making sure
τα
that
έξι λες θα πάει.
in this position there are no attacks going on. The king won't be in any danger. There are no dark squared bishops to put on the diagonal and towards the king. So f4, I mean, it's a very natural and good move.
Για να δούμε.
Judah, I do really applaud you because you always are like, let's pawn storm, throw them all up the board, and I admittedly don't see the immediate downside of pushing f4 next.
Well, yeah, I like to push pawns, and I like to say that, of course, it's not my pawn and it's not my game, and it's easy to say, but I'm very authentic in this, I believe, because I have tons of games where I did play pawn push, f4, g4, and all kind of moves. In the beginning of my career, it was successful, but maybe not very good moves all the time. Later on, I understand that I shouldn't make weaknesses so often, but still, I was more careful, but I was in the big friendship with these pawn moves. But I think if you look at it,
Δημήτρη, ευχαριστώ. Καλώς ήρθες.
b4 and f4 later.
Καλώς ήρθες, Δημήτρη. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
For White's position, having the knight on d4, which is the key element in this position for White to have the knight on d4. And it is very important that White should be able, not allowing Black to play rook c8, b6, c5 to push it away, because then
Δεν
white
ξέρω
is
αν
getting
ακούγεται
level
κάποιος
on the
ήχος,
square.
notification,
So
κάτι
white has to
τέτοιο,
make sure
ή δεν
that,
ακούγεται
that
τίποτα.
black
Γιατί εγώ
will
τώρα
be not
το stream μου
able
δεν
to
το
do.
ακούω.
This will be the battle around that. If black can play c5 with good circumstances and push back the knight.
Αλλιώς θα πρέπει να το φτιάξω και αυτά.
An idea that Gukesh will aim for if he's allowed to. And f4 does not have the drawbacks here as it might in some other positions, so I do like it. It claims space and makes sure that the e5 square, for example, will be under white's control. And I do want to note that Gukesh is doing the right thing right now, because he knows he's going to move his bishop. The question is where to. And as I said, if this were a blitz game, a bullet game, whatever, he would play bishop h7 and not think twice. But perhaps there's a reason, Judith, where bishop g6 might just be a little bit better. It gives the king a space, some luft to escape to later. Not that we're thinking back rank checkmates now, but these are the types of nuances that can be important. But I know what you're thinking, Judith. I don't attempt to read your brain, but if bishop g6, you're inviting f4, f5 with tempo.
Λοιπόν, πήγε τέρμα πίσω τελικά.
Sitting in the pawn's path.
Κωνσταντίνε, δεν πήγε τα 6.
Gukesh was basically thinking about it, because try to figure out what really Ding has in mind after bishop h7, because I don't see any reason why bishop g6 would be a better move than bishop h7. Because indeed, after f4, clearly white at some point may want to go f5 to block the bishop, and it can be very unpleasant for black. Though we see not f4, but queen b3 first. Still, I believe the bishop on h7 stands better than on g6 in the long run. But also, we shouldn't forget that Gukesh right now is in the position where he's up in time, more than 10 minutes. So he could have
ό,τι παίχτηκε στην παρτίδα.
he was not spending
Τώρα το
too much
μεταξύ
time on
μου βγάζει και μια παρτίδα. Δεν ξέρω πώς το κάνει αυτό το lichess. Με το Fedoshev. Αλλά ο αντίπαλός του ήταν 2.400, οπότε τεράστια διαφορά. Και έχασε κιόλας. Δεν ξέρω τι παιχνίδι είναι αυτό, για να το δω. Rapid είναι.
Calculate a little bit, and he has worked his way out of it. So queen b3, this
2017, μάλιστα.
to press forward on the queen side makes perfect sense. Later, rook f to c1, and then a4 will be an option.
Και τώρα τι υπάρχει εδώ, υποσβητατρία,
This is really the key in this position, because a4
ναι, για να έχει ένα από τα δύο.
And if black plays a5 right now, Judith, I think
αλλά έτσι δεν πάει η βασίλισσα μετά εκεί. Και δ3.
Protect your pawn with another, because this b4 pawn does cover this very important c5 square.
Indeed, as you say, the b4 pawn is essential to cover the c5 square.
Okay, για να δούμε.
I'm thinking right now that can we figure out why knight d4 is more important to play first for Ding, and only after that playing bishop queen b3? Is it something concrete that he had in mind? Why the knight stands better on d4 already before playing queen b3? Or it's
λοιπόν, βασίλισσα β3. Okay.
a decision he made? Because sometimes, just sometimes, I want to say that the threat is more powerful than actually the execution, and knight d4 was always there to play in the next move.
So I guess if I'm reading into this correctly, so queen b3 first. Is there some reason that knight d4 bishop h7?
Ναι, το α4 θα είχα παίξει νωρίτερα εγώ, Κωνσταντίνε.
Yeah.
Ναι, Βασίλη. Έπαιξε βασίλισσα, για να δούμε. Νομίζω είναι και νέα κίνηση, δεν βγάζει τώρα παρτίδα. Αν και μερικές φορές τη βγάζει μετά. Αλλά φαντάζομαι όχι, γιατί στις άλλες δεν είχε παιχτεί. Τον ύπο βάζανε εκεί. Προτίμησε τη βασίλισσά του. Το οποίο και εγώ μου φαίνεται πιο καλό.
I think it's a very good reaction what you're pointing out by playing knight e4, and this can be. But you see, the reason why I ask this question, because these are the very small details which can lead the game built up to an advantage and later on to a win, where we don't necessarily see why exactly, but this can be a conclusion or a reaction to queen b3, and also that he wanted to gain space and improve the position of the knight first. But indeed, knight e4 seems to be pretty logical. But after knight d4, bishop h7, queen b3.
Και μετά κάποια στιγμή α4.
Yeah, knight e4 can
Ίσως
definitely
στα
be played here.
5.
I'm wondering, I mean, I'm also trying to figure out the difference, like, you know, why is that knight just on
Αυτό
d4
το
so
σκεπτικό
important?
ίσως.
Would that even give a plus? And we see that nothing has really changed, at least from the objective evaluation. And
Ναι,
if
το
you
αν
take on
παίχτει
e4,
αυτό,
d takes e4, at least maybe that doesn't come with a tempo, but actually this would just be a transposition anyway. So, I am trying to figure this question out. I think as you're very importantly indicating, Judith, like these nuances, they actually are very consequential at the high level that you played at, and you know continue to. And the Gukesh and Ding Liren, they can't afford to make these little mistakes because they build up, and then pressure mounts, and then you feel like you are getting squeezed. But
δεν υπάρχει κάτι
for
μέχρι στιγμής κάτι
Gukesh, I
ιδιαίτερο στη
think that
θέση.
he doesn't mind. Like these little details, perhaps right now, he's
Θέλει
not
να
so
παίξει
worried about. Like,
β5
his big
λευκός, έτσι
picture is
δείχνει.
he's safe. His position is just
Ναι,
that
το
solid.
θέμα είναι να παίξει πρώτα α4 μετά β5.
Black's position is very solid.
Κάτι τέτοιο
But
σκεφτόμουν
let's say
εγώ,
if
Κωνσταντίνε.
White would be playing several moves, White can improve his position very clearly. Rook c1, maybe even knight a4 and knight c5, like after rook fc1. If we forget about all these kind of plans which we were talking before to play f4, which I still believe at one point it may be on the board.
Και να στρέψει το ενδιαφέρον εδώ.
So rook fc1 and then play knight a4 and improve the other knight's position.
Αλλά όσο υπάρχει αυτός ο αξιωματικός, είναι λίγο θέμα.
a5, b5.
I'm just going to put a few moves on because it's an important variation that, let's say black plays a6 or something kind of quiet, knight a4 comes, and then I'm just going to sort of waste a move with like rook c8 and then knight to c5. So this is Judith's point, which is an extremely good one, that if black were to ever take on c5, something that you definitely don't want to do, look at how the transformation of pawn structure impacts the position. This b7 pawn is what we call a backwards pawn. It would love to move forward, b5,
Πρώτα
but don't forget
πρέπει να
about this little
απαγορεύσει
French rule called en
το
passant,
γ6,
because c takes b6 and white is
γ5.
just winning.
Α, λες
If
αυτό,
white couldn't take en passant, then black is just hanging in there. But because that rule exists, it means you have a big eyesore on b7, and you're just on the defensive for the rest of the game.
Yes, so we can say that
Τώρα πώς θα το απαγορέψεις όμως
this
αυτό?
is the dream plan of white, right? But Gukesh is not going to be sitting there and actually
Ναι, μόνο αν είχε τον ύπο εδώ, ξέρω εγώ.
support this plan of Ding. So he will want to do some reaction, and also of course after knight a4, knight e4 can be even more powerful.
Αλλά άμα φύγει αυτό,
So it's not
έρχεται
so
αυτός εδώ.
easy to execute this from white side.
Και χτυπάει και εδώ. Είναι λίγο περίεργη θέση.
Altogether, perhaps knight e4 right now for Gukesh might be an advisable move. Just forcing a trade of knights.
Θοδωρής, η ιδέα πήρους ε8.
And knight takes d2 would be a threat. So actually you are just forcing the material
Βασίλισσα
off the board, and I guess
ε7
the question is,
για να φτιάξει αυτή την μπαταρία, ναι.
with trades,
Και πως ε4 έχει νόημα, ναι. Και δεν χρειάζεται καν να φέρει όλες αυτές τις δυνάμεις εδώ, γιατί έχει ούτως ή άλλως τον αξιωματικό και το ποιον ύπο που υποστηρίζει τον ύπο.
If I can choose, I don't want to trade anything. But one thing is sure, I don't want to trade my knight on d4. But there is not even a chance to trade that one. So actually black can go rook e8 with an idea to go knight f8 and knight e6, trying to push back the knight from d4. But there is a good chance that it's going to be pretty slow, or too slow for playing this way. So knight e4 is something that black should be considering. The other idea that he's just playing solid and slow, maybe to play queen e7 and queen d6 also, that I think would be a great spot for the queen. And knight e4 is always something that black should be considering.
Για να δούμε τι θα κάνει. Θα περιμένει τώρα λογικά να δει τι θα παίξει ο Liren, τι έχει στο νου του, πριν ξεκινήσει οτιδήποτε. Έτσι φαντάζομαι.
Very clearly, and black wants to be ready for any action. I don't know if, let's say, we would take off the white square bishop, what it would give for white and black. And in one hand, the f5 square would be a weak one, but for now, I don't see that white can really do too much with that. And I think it would be possibly more important for black to go knight g4 options. And the way white can be better is because of the structure. The pieces are not such a big deal for the moment, I think, in difference. The d4 knight seems to be very comfortable there, but it must not necessarily be there forever.
And Judith, when you say the structure, this pawn chain, we love pawn chains. That means that we have don't have to use more valuable pieces to defend the pawn. So the b7 and d5 is healthy, and I guess you're saying that because of that, black is just very solid, and thus, while the pieces are less active from the black side, at least the pawns are well defended, and there's not.
Μέσα ότι παίζει αυτό.
Yes, the
Άμα
pawn
φας
structure
εδώ,
there is very
εδώ,
stable for black, absolutely, and
γιατί
it is
παίζεις,
so
ξέρω εγώ,
difficult
κάτι
to
τέτοιο,
crash with white.
πίσω,
Especially now that the knight is on d4, the only
μετά?
breaking point is to play b5 on the queen side. And for now, when the knight is on d4, that cannot be the plan of white, because after c5 comes with the tempo, black is just doing very fine. Very important tempo, which is gaining by black.
Δεν μπορώ να δω κάτι.
So,
Δεν μπορεί να δω,
so
θα
there
παιχτεί
are
κάποια
some
στιγμή όλη καλύτερη
maneuvering
βασίλισσα
and
πίσω από τον πύργο.
piece improvement has to be done for white, but somehow I feel that f4 will have to come. It's the only
Ναι,
thing
κάποια
that
στιγμή ότι θα
previously
παιχτεί, θα
was
παιχτεί.
more of a priority for Ding. I'm also curious, of course, where white is going to bring his
Όπως
rook.
πιστεύω και τα λευκά θα φέρουν πύργο στο γαμμένο
But
κάποια στιγμή.
right now, actually, that we are talking about this, maybe a4
Για μένα αυτός ο αξιωματικός με ενοχλεί πάρα πολύ.
What do you think? Because if
Αν μπορούσα να τον
black
ανταλλάξω,
takes
τον
a5,
αντάλλαζα, αλλά
that should be the good reaction for black on a4, a5. Maybe white can capture b takes a5, and the b7 pawn is hanging.
ναι, η μπάρα είναι ίση.
But maybe black just plays knight c5 with the tempo, and after that he can capture back
Ακριβώς ίση
the
βασικά.
a5 pawn. So probably a5 would be early.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It feels like that's an idea you'd want to go forward with, but as long as black can meet a4 with a5, as you've astutely
Για να δούμε, γιατί και ο Gukesh τώρα έχει μπει σε τέτοιο.
about those pawn pushes. So we'll try to see if that can be worked out. Gukesh is deep in thought, and I guess, Judith, quickly, I want to ask you, as Gukesh continues to ponder his decision before we head to break, do you feel like this position is more up one player
Ο
than
υπολογιστής
out the
εδώ
other, or do you think both are
δίνει
comfortable
έτσι φάγωμα, όχι με τον
with
αξιωματικό
the dynamic?
καλύτερο για τα μαύρα, ας πούμε.
I don't know how comfortable Gukesh about his
Ξέρω γιατί.
position and what kind of experience he has in this structure and this kind of position, but I think he's quite
Αυτό
okay.
τώρα το ποιον είναι
But he does
αυτό που λέμε
have to
καθυστερημένο.
understand the position, the
Okay.
ins and out of it, that he can play it well. Because there are a lot of plans. Like, do I have to keep my knight on d7 to be able to jump to e5 if it's needed? Do I have to keep my queen on d8, or should I be replacing it to d6 when there is action?
Τα μαύρα τώρα, ναι, κάπως η βασίλισσα αυτή να αναπνεύσει λίγο, αλλά
in what circumstances, capturing back with the pawn from d5 or bringing my bishop. So there are a lot of questions to be asked by himself of Gukesh. So he can spend a lot of time, and it can cause mistakes also to be played.
Okay, you heard it from Judith herself here, that there's so many questions with every single move. So these players, they are trying to work through the complications as best they can.
Ένα δέκατο του πιονιού είναι μέχρι τις πρώτες 20-30 κινήσεις. Ναι, εντάξει, δύσκολο να δεις κάτι που να ξεφύγει στις πρώτες κινήσεις. Παίζουν πολύ προσεκτικά, ξοδεύουν χρόνο. Εντάξει, είναι λογικό. Και είναι και μαζί στο χρόνο, δεν έχει κάποιος. Τώρα, ας πούμε, ξαναπήρε το προβάδισμα ο Liren για λίγο.
Will gather in Oslo, Norway from December 17th to 21st, and you are invited into the room.
Και αυτό θα είναι ωραίο τουρνουά,
And high caliber action. Tickets also include perks like hand and brain, simuls, photo ops with players, and more. Use the command CCT Finals in chat or visit go.chess.com/CCTfinals24 to secure your tickets now. We are going to head to a quick break, but when we return, it is more from Singapore. This is the 2024 FIDE World Championship.
Επιστρέφω.
Mom wore this to my wedding.
Yeah. Yeah, she did. We'd each make one move every morning before starting our day. Never got to finish this one. You been practicing?
Not since I was a kid. Why first? You gonna be all right, Dad?
I'm gonna be good.
Love you. Love you too.
Λοιπόν,
Come to Angelina's
δεν
party?
έχει παίξει ακόμα ο Gukesh.
All right.
Hello?
Ready to play?
When did you do this?
Don't worry about it. It's your move. Playing Grandpa.
Really?
Yeah. It's kind of about to destroy me. He's pretty good. Nice one, Dad. Oh, granddaughter showdown.
Θα ήθελα να παίξω αυτό, αλλά πρώτα
Yep.
θα ήθελα να παίξω αυτό, δεν θέλω να έχει πρόσβαση εδώ ο ύπος.
Magic work again. Really?
Are you sure about that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll just see.
Για να δω κάτι άλλο.
All right, well.
Στο τρώμε τον αξιωματικό, ξέρω εγώ.
Gotcha.
Έχει περίεργη λίγο θέση μετά.
That's incredible. Nice going.
You underestimated her, Grandpa.
Νομίζω τα μαύρα πρέπει να επιδόξουν να βάλουν τους ύπους στο ε4 και στο ε5. Ναι, τώρα η καλύτερη κίνηση τα μαύρα είναι αυτό. Αυτόν τον κρατάει εδώ να δούμε μήπως υποστηρίξει κανένα γάμα 5 ίσως. Έχει και πρόσβαση εδώ. Ναι, πάντως όταν τα άλογα αλληλοϊποστηρίζονται δεν είναι και πολύ δυνατά.
This December, the world's top chess minds clash in the heart of New York City at the FIDE World Rapid and Blitz Championship. Witness world number one Magnus Carlsen and other stars from across the globe.
Δεν χτυπάνε μαζί στα ίδια τετράγωνα γι' αυτό.
Thrilling form, unpredictable and unforgettable. Fast moves, tactics and blunders and moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Witness the
Το ύπος ε4 δεν νομίζω να τον φάει. Δεν νομίζω να τον φάει. Πολύ ενοχλητικός όμως, να τον είσαι εδώ. Θα μου πεις εντάξει, πώς και να τον διώξεις. Όχι, τι λέω. Γιατί... χτυπάει εδώ. Άμα δεν τον φας, πρέπει να υποστηρίξεις αυτό. Με τι. Πες τη βασίλισσα πίσω. Ή πύργο. Δεν ξέρω. Εγώ μάλλον θα τον έτρωγα αν τον έβλεπα εδώ. Δεν θα ήθελα να βρίσκεται εδώ.
Because he is on the clock, and for Ding Liren, suffered defeat before the rest day just 2 days ago. So
Βασίλισσα
Gukesh evened
Β2.
up this
Ναι.
match and is looking to continue his good form. I'm Grandmaster Robert Hess alongside Grandmaster Judith Polgar. Judith, it seems like Gukesh, he has not figured out
Βασίλισσα
what to do
Β2
here. Are you
και να φέρει
surprised
τον
by
άλλο
the amount
μετά,
of
ξέρω
time he
εγώ.
spent, or do you think that it makes sense given all that we've discussed, so many different possibilities?
Και να τον διώξεις τώρα με Δέλτα
I
3.
think it makes a lot of sense what he's doing now because I think we can say that it's a critical moment, the first real critical moment of the game.
Εδώ το σένθω.
Because now we see
Αυτό
what
το
structure we
υποστηρίζεις,
have.
εντάξει, δεν
We
υπάρχει
see which
πρόβλημα.
pieces got eliminated from the board, only one pair of black square bishops. And now it's time to make up his mind what plan he's going to be doing. And this is one of the most
Σκέφτεται και ο
difficult
Gukesh βλέπω
things
σήμερα πάντως.
that you end up in a middle game and you have to make your planning. And if something goes wrong, you have to replan yourself, right? So here, before the break, we were already discussing that there are quite a few
Για όσοι δεν έχετε κάνει εγγραφή, κάντε εγγραφή στο κανάλι και κάντε και κάνα like.
Yeah, it also depends on the player's style, which direction he wants to go. But of course, there is objectivity as well to it. And when people start to learn openings, I always tell them, which is not very new, but that's how I was raised, and I studied my openings, which was very different in those times, how to learn openings. But I think one thing is very important. No matter what opening you're playing, you have to understand the middle game structures and the ins and outs and the ideas. Where to put your rook, to e8 or c8, or leave it on a8. Where do you put your queen, d6 or e7? Where does it serve you better in the long run? Where do you keep your knight?
Άμα δεν έχω ένα αξιωματικό και τα πιόνια δεν την μπλοκάρουν, μου αρέσει να βάζω τη βασίλισσα στα τετράγωνά του. Α, οπότε θέλεις, ναι, κατάλαβα τι λες. Δεν έχεις μαύρο τετράγωνο, θες τη βασίλισσα να είναι σε μαύρα. Συμφωνώ. Δεν πολύ αρέσει η θέση των λευκών εδώ. Με ενοχλεί πολύ αξιωματικός και άμα έρθει και ο ύπος εδώ, όχι ότι κινδυνεύεις ας πούμε, αλλά κατά πάσα πιθανότητα εγώ θα πούσαρα εδώ και θα χάνα. Μάλλον. Αλλά όπως και να έχει τώρα, πρέπει να δούμε θα παίξει ο Gukesh, ο οποίος έπαιξε τελικά όντως. Όχι, έφερε τον άλλον ύπο τελικά. Μάλιστα. Οκ.
And after b takes a5, if you could get the knight to c5, which could happen from d7, hitting the queen on b3 and very importantly the pawn on b7, that's not available anymore. So, Judith, I think now would be the time for white to press forward instead of with f4, but over there on the queen side with a4.
Yes, very good observation that I cannot go knight c5 at this point, but the question is whether can I still be playing a5, because what about capturing back queen takes a5 and maybe after queen b7 I was thinking of playing c5, but then knight b3 or knight c6 also possible, so
μάλιστα, έφερε αυτόν τον ύπο, δεν έφερε τον άλλο.
You know what's interesting, Judah? It looks to my eyes like it's really bad for black, and yet we only see.
Εδώ βέβαια δεν πάει πουθενά αυτός.
Somehow, even this position where it would appear that white should be in charge.
Εδώ και τον άλλο είπα και να πάει δεν κάνει κάτι.
I'm gonna do us all a favor. I'm gonna quickly turn on the Silicon Beast. What? Queen d8. I'm confused. Like
I'm trying to figure out what is this on knight c5. Is it just simply d4 and looking for compensation?
Το α4 είναι καλή κίνηση επίθεση με ψηφίας. Ναι, απλά δεν θα μπορεί να μην έκανε σωστά την εκτέλεσή της. Αλλά θα μου άρεσε. Τώρα βέβαια που έχει αυτό τον ύπο εκεί.
Yeah, that's really nice. Knight c6 at the end of trap. I'm going to just show everybody that the queen is going to be hounded, and it's not getting out of there. No matter where you put your queen, knight c6 actually traps that thing. So, I mean, your intuition, dude, I think that's where I'm going here. Your intuition
Μπορεί και να παίζει
spot
αυτό,
on
αλλά...
that there may be a time where you just give up d7, play for c5, play ambitiously, and actually if we maybe even invert the move order after take here, maybe c5 to start with, just so you can kick that knight away and then take on f5. I'm, you know, not normally one who wants to give away pawns even for that clear play. I know you're definitely an active player like that. I'm taking your side of things here. I actually am now starting to believe that this could be dangerous for white because black gets to storm forward.
Yes, indeed. Like, that's a question. What happens on immediate c5 if white goes back knight f3?
Ο Liren πρέπει να προσέξει γιατί έχει συγκεντρώσει όλες τις δυνάμεις στην πλευρά της βασίλισσας. Ναι, μάλλον εκεί θέλει να επιτεθεί. Εντάξει, για την ώρα δεν υπάρχει κάτι εδώ. Αλλά ναι, ενδεχομένως με αυτό δημιουργώ ίσως εδώ θέματα, εντάξει, μετά θα πρέπει να προσέξω. Όχι κάτι άμεσο, αλλά... Το Z4 τώρα δεν είναι κίνδυνο. Αφήνει το ε5 στα μαύρα. Ναι. Για μελλοντικά, ας πούμε, ναι. Εντάξει, έχω τον ύπο εδώ. Αλλά, οκ.
Try to liquidate on the queen side in the next few moves by winning the a pawn and maybe the second one after that.
Απλά μετά, ναι, έχω κάπως προσπαθώ να επεκταθώ εδώ και έχω κινήσει και αυτό, ναι, ίσως θα είναι λίγο too much. Ο υπολογιστής τι προτείνει, για να δω τον άλλο υπολογιστή βασικά τι προτείνει. Α4.
Clearly a trickier position than the ones that we've been analyzing before, because now it's getting sharp and tactical, and if black isn't careful, it seems like the position could collapse quite quickly. So I do not.
Κοίταξε, θα δούμε. Αν ο Liren προσπαθήσει να επεκταθεί εδώ που μάλλον αυτό θα κάνει, ενδεχομένως να προσπαθήσει να βρει αντεπίθεση εδώ ο Gukesh, οπότε θα δούμε πολύ ωραίο παιχνίδι. Αλλά για να δούμε. Ακόμα είμαστε στη 13η κίνηση.
Engine, the evaluation bar still is hovering in the middle, but I mean, I would much prefer to be on the white side of this position up a pawn, and black has to find that compensation.
But if we can go back to the position.
Να είναι δεσμευτικό. Αδύνατο το σημείο του Κινέζου στο Δ2. Ναι, αν ας πούμε αυτό το πιόνι φύγει, μετά αυτό γίνεται στόχος.
Is it to go back to d7? No, that's not possible.
Εκτός να τα καταφέρεις να το φέρεις εδώ, ξέρω εγώ. Άμα δεν υπάρχει ο ύπος.
Well, okay, we can just do process of elimination. Knight c4 loses a pawn, so I don't.
Ακόμα και υπολογιστής μου αντιγράφει και εγώ κάθομαι και μαζεύω.
So I don't like that one either. So that leaves these two squares, and knight g6 looks really weird.
Θα έχεις πάει τώρα τελικό εδώ πέρα με τον Gukesh, θα τον είχες κάνει.
So I guess he's just provoking f4, which, yeah, we wanted that to play that move even unprovoked.
But how is that possible that you want to provoke me playing f4, losing 2 tempes there? I just don't understand this.
I would say equally, but I think I'm even more confused because if the knight goes back to d7, this was a move that I thought we wanted. What's the downside of playing f4? I guess maybe that's the...
τώρα συζητάνε το Z4 για να δω.
And I am saying it for the entirety of the audience. Like, why would f4, which is a move we kept talking about, why would black invite that move with tempo? Because what is the downside of playing f4?
Okay. Ωραία, ας το δούμε λίγο καλύτερα. Ποιο είναι το καλύτερο? Μέσα ότι πάει εδώ.
I mean, I wanted to go f4 without gaining 2 tempos, and now knight e5 is provoking completely f4 move.
Βέβαια, άμα πάει εδώ, κλείνει αυτή τη διαγώνιο. Οπότε μπορεί να μην πάει εδώ. Έστω ότι πάει εδώ.
What you mentioned before, so that's another big question.
Yeah, I think this question though is the more confusing one for me. Like I'm like,
ξέρω, δεν βλέπω κάτι άμεσο.
He allows f4 to be.
Καλησπέρα, Άλεξ. Α4 Liren, μην το σκέφτεσαι γιατί θα βγεις πάλι εκτός χρόνου. Εντάξει, για την ώρα τουλάχιστον ας πούμε ότι έχει και λίγο παραπάνω, οπότε τον αφήνουμε για την ώρα. Δεν τον πιέζουμε. Άμα το παρακάνει, να του στείλουμε κάνα μήνυμα. Άλεξ, τι λέει?
Yes, I think knight a4 is a big problem because that knight is now trapped in there.
Knight d1 also. Okay, now I'm a little bit puzzled. This is what I can say, and I'm just looking f4 like, is it such a bad move to give away 2 tempes?
Okay, I'm going to go back to g6 because I don't understand retreating to d7. So is there a world where knight g6 somehow is just step 1 and we're going to keep moving that knight around? Knight's tour.
Oh, well. I mean, you have to admit that it's not a very tempting move. You do it because there is nothing else, right? Because...
Καλά, μπρο, καλά.
Well, yeah, that bishop is
Εδώ
something
πέρα.
unique,
Προσπαθούμε
right?
να δούμε πώς θα
After
κερδίσουμε
h6.
τον Gukesh.
But Black can try to go knight h4 afterwards, but somehow it seems a strange regrouping and maneuvering for the knight to g6. Well, of course, if Black... Sorry.
No, go ahead, Judith.
I just thought that knight e7 or knight h4 and then possibly knight f5 to get rid of, push away the d4 knight. But still, I'm confused about that, as if Black has enough time for that.
I guess that is the claim, that the knight on d4 is so strong that you're willing to invite f4 with tempo, move your knight all around the board as if we're doing the knight's tour, and all that said, just to get rid of this knight on d4, which actually makes a lot of sense. Like, now that you mentioned it, and now that we're here, I'm just going to make a couple turns. Let's say I play a4 and knight e7, and we go forward with one of the other plans we talked about. Once we get here with knight f5, if these knights get traded, Black does have this big idea with pawn to d4, and now we see the drawback of f4, because if that pawn were on f2, White would play d4 in such a position. But you're not playing d4 with this e3 pawn becoming an immediate target. So I'm trying to justify, at least retrospectively, the decision making from Gukesh. The evaluation bar still is relatively towards the middle, so we know
Ας σταθεί παρτίδα από το λευκό, βλέπω, ενώ είναι πολύ σταθερός παίκτης, για να δούμε αν τα καταφέρει, για να δούμε. Εντάξει, μέχρι τώρα δεν τον φοβάμαι. Και στο χρόνο δεν είναι ότι έχει... δεν έχει καμία σχέση με τις προηγούμενες παρτίδες. Βέβαια το θέμα ότι... εντάξει, θέλει νίκη σήμερα, εντάξει, δεν θες να πας ισοπαλία. Ο Gukesh και να πάρει την ισοπαλία νομίζω θα είναι άνετος. Αφού σοφάρισε προχθές.
What about White playing f5? Can I do that? Or after knight e7?
Maybe now... oh, so a4 is probably a bad move from White, but I think it's because of these a5 and c5 ideas, so I will not make that incorrect move with a4, and I don't know, what else can we do instead? Maybe bring a...
well, there's a question to ask, what about bishop d3 to exchange the white square bishop, and then come back with the queen to c2 if it's necessary to control those white squares. Or the other question is whether, if Black goes knight e7, I think f5 actually it's not very possible because Black can go b6 and with the plan of c5, and it's very hard to stop it with the white side.
Okay, but now we're talking, Judith, because a few moves ago,
Έλα, Bon Clave.
it's
Πιόνι α4 να παίξει ανταλλαγή στο β5. Ναι, α4 είναι και η καλύτερη κίνηση. Και αυτό δείχνει ότι θέλει να κάνει εδώ την επίθεση αυτή μειοψηφίας, αλλά μέχρι στιγμής αργεί. Λιστοδορεί, εφόσον έχει τον έλεγχο του κέντρου, ο μαύρος με 3-1 πρέπει να εστιάσει να δημιουργήσει υπεροπλία στην πτέρυγα του βασιλιά και να κοιτάξει να του δημιουργήσει αδυναμία και να επιτεθεί. Αυτός και ο Gukesh κατά πάσα πιθανότητα, μάλλον αν δει ότι εδώ κάνει commit το Liren, θα επιτεθεί εδώ. Αλλά θα δούμε πώς θα εξελιχθεί.
Absolutely.
Και τι
It's
ανταλλαγές
a
μπορεί να
very
γίνουν.
committal move and idea by Ding if he's going to go, especially f5 is very tricky.
Σε αυτό το
Because, for
επίπεδο μαύρος
example,
για την
after
ισοπαλία
queen
παλεύει
d6,
πάντα.
knight
Ναι, αυτό
g4,
έχεις το στόχο στην
possibilities
αρχή.
are also
Αλλά ανάλογα
there,
πώς σε πάει η παρτίδα, άμα σου
especially
δώσει
if I move
το...
my bishop
άμα
to
σου δώσει
d4.
κάποιο πάτημα.
So, at this
Και
point,
δεν ξέρω αν είναι και ο
White has to
στόχος
be
του Liren
careful
αυτός.
a lot also, so maybe this is too much.
Δηλαδή σου δίνω λίγο
playing
πάτημα να
to
νομίζεις
direct.
ότι κάτι μπορεί να κάνεις, αλλά
If we go back to the position which is standing on the board, very interesting idea to play knight e5.
τώρα βέβαια
Still,
φαντάζομαι δεν βρίσκεται μέσα στην προετοιμασία του.
kind of strange
Ή τουλάχιστον
in some
σε αυτά
ways.
ακριβώς που είχε σχεδιάσει.
I feel, Judith, that yeah, our initial reaction is
Το
just
σχέδιο
one
του
of
λευκού
hesitation
μοιάζει αργό.
because
Ναι.
it does
Ύπος
feel like
α4.
it allows white to proceed with f4 and also a4
Ναι.
and both
Θέλει
options
να τον
would
φέρει στο γάμα
promising
5.
to some extent for Ding, but this knight e5 move has also caused Ding to spend time. He's investing in this current position because f4 is not a move you can take back. a4, of course, you also can't take back. When you push a pawn, that one is not going to be able to return. So both of these decisions, a4 may allow a5, and then it can become tactical on the queen side. f4, if you do play f5 later, you open up some pathways for black's pieces as well. So big moment here. You were saying it's a critical moment first for Gukesh, and now he throws that right back to Ding, saying, what are you going to do? Which pawn are you going to push?
Yeah, knight e5, again we see that basically Gukesh played the most active move in the position. He played the most active move, like knight e5, straightforward, provoking white to play f4. If white is not playing f4, then why not to have the knight on e5? Also at some point, black wants to get ready to play b6 and c5. But it is a very unexpected plan for me right here in this position, that provoking f4 and then possibly really black goes back to g6 and regrouping his knight to e7. Very supports this very much this b6 c5 idea, because white's key piece is the d4 knight right now, which cannot be kicked out in the next few moves for sure, and c5 is the only way to kick it out, or to try to exchange it with the knight maneuver. a4.
Yes, a4.
Ναι,
Ding decides
έχουμε
not to
α4
take that
τελικά.
knight out
Οκ.
from e5. And Judith, your idea with queen d6 is also one that we should continue to mention, because that knight was in the way of the queen stepping forward, but maybe queen d6 not threatening here because the bishop remains on e2, covering that g4 square, and white can continue pressing forward on the queen side with a5. That's the space grab that frustrates players from the black side of all sorts of, I was going to say Maratsi Bind, because I'm just thinking too much of Carlsbad structures. When you have a Carlsbad structure like this and black has this lovely pawn chain, white can either try to break the chain with b5, but we keep talking about how black wants to play c5, so b5 not available here, but a5 can threaten to shorten that chain with a6, and if after a5, a6, give me all of these dark squares with knight to a4 coming very shortly. So, I mean, Judith, so many possibilities here, such a rich position, and I'm starting to feel like both players, they're settling into this game, which was once quiet. It's not that quiet anymore.
No, it's getting very interesting. Also knight e4.
Καλά σου περνάει η ώρα, δεν θα
can
είναι
be
και
a
τόσο
move
quiet
which,
όντως.
follow up for black by
Για να
the
δούμε
way.
τώρα
With an idea
πώς θα
of
απαντήσει ο
first of all
Gukesh.
attacking the d2 pawn, and if there is an exchange on e4, then after d takes e4,
Ξάλφα
there is a
5.
space for the knight, sometimes on d3, though I'm not saying that black would be rushing to do that.
Αλλά όχι, έτσι του δίνει αυτό.
But black can play later queen d6, king h8, f5 kind of moves as well, and it's not so clear how white can get advantage, because after a5 black would be playing a6, so there is a stabilization on the queen side. Very beautiful knight on d4. I think Ding had
ναι, και τι μπορεί να κάνεις.
was it game 1 in the candidates where he had this kind of pawn structure with knight on d4, but there was some heavy problems on the king side at the end. Maybe was it against Nepo in game 1?
That's correct. Yes, it was against Nepo.
It was some kind of
Αυτά εδώ μετά είναι πολύ
structure
ενοχλητικά.
like this, having the knight on d4 and black had knight on e5. So not very nice memories from there for the.
But this could make some nice
Άλεξ, δεν
memories.
ξέρω,
You
γιατί
can
δεν ξέρω και πολύ καλά τους παίκτες
I look at
όλους.
this position, Judith, and I know it's in your style.
Οπότε
I don't even have to ask. But queen can come out to the h4. A rook lift is in the future. Rook
δεν ξέρω και ποιοι θα είναι ακριβώς.
And I was mentioning before,
Γιατί δεν
the
γράφει
side
το
that
τέτοιο.
controls the
Το
pawn
έψαχνα πριν,
breaks
αλλά δεν βρήκα κάτι. Έχεις
off
κάποιο
to the
site να μου
side.
δώσεις να δω τα
No more
ονόματα?
pawn breaks for white
Αν
if
έχεις.
you allow this structure to settle, because b5 is firmly under control.
Το οποίο δυστυχώς
Black
ξεκινάει τη
position,
Δευτέρα.
now we can focus on the queen, king
Πέφτει
side,
πάνω
excuse
σε
me,
αυτό.
for black.
Αλλά εντάξει, ευτυχώς είναι άλλες ώρες, είναι 3:30.
Yes,
Άλλες, αν έχουν τελειώσει αυτοί.
It can be very complicated, and in such a structure after
Το
d3,
βρήκες πριν.
d4,
Ωραία, αν
I
μπορείς,
have to
δώσε μου
be
link
careful
για να
what
το
moves
δω,
to
γιατί
do
έψαχνα
to
πριν, αλλά δεν το βρήκα.
So that's why I thought knight e4 might be an interesting plan also, which is not necessarily a move that white has to be capturing on e4, but actually maybe after this a5 would be a mistake, and maybe white should be playing rook c1 and try to push b5.
And now I'm going to ask that all-time annoying question. Which rook to c1? Because we keep talking about rook f to c1 to play over there on the queen side, but I'm starting to get worried about the white king, because you mentioned king h8, f5, f4. This queen will be free also to roam about on the king side. So is it rook f or rook a c1? Does
I think at this point I would go rook a c1, if you're asking it already. And you didn't just play it with one of them.
I just, I'm a little bit concerned. I know who I'm talking to. Let me put it that way. I know what you're capable of, Judith. So rook ac1 was also going to be my choice. And the point that we're trying to highlight is b5 is now what we want. We want to break the queen side open with a pawn minority attack. And the knight on d4, it's such a strong piece here. Can't get booted unless black is able
Τους
to
γράφει προς το τέλος. Προσπαθώ να βρω τρόπο.
Yes, that's the point, that we have to play b5.
Προσπαθώ να βρω τρόπο ώστε ο μαύρος να καταφέρει να φέρει τον ύπο ζήτα ητα 4.
That's essential to keep it there.
Ναι.
So black can go.
Και τη βασίλισσα στο... Ναι, το σκέφτηκα και εγώ αυτό σε κάποια φάση νωρίτερα, Ανδρέα.
Good spot.
Very. I know what you're aiming for, an eventual knight g4. It's always on the radar, but the bishop on e2, it's sitting at home. So many different transformations possible. I think that's one of the big talking points here, is that in the live board, a4 is played. Will black play a5? Will white get to play a5? Will knight e4 happen? And then black take back with the d pawn, so we won't... we'll see an open d file for black potentially to use, but then there's queen side and the king side. So there is a lot to figure out here.
Απειλώντας ματ, θα παίξει τα 3, θα σε στείλει πίσω και μπορεί και να σε αγνοήσει, ξέρω, και να παίξει εδώ. Μάλιστα. Γιατί απειλεί αυτό, αυτό αν κινηθεί πέφτει αυτό.
Chess has a longer history in India than in any other country. 1400 years ago, people here were playing the game that would eventually become chess. But for most of the 20th century, India was not a major player on the chess scene. That all changed thanks to one man, Vishwanathan Anand. In 1988, Anand became the first grandmaster from India. It was just the beginning of what would be a historic career. By 2007, Vishy had become the world #1 and the undisputed world champion. At that time, there were still just 16 Indian grandmasters. Now there are 85. Well over half of them have earned that title since 2015 alone. In the past few years, Anand's mantle has been taken up by several young stars. Vidit Gujarati, Arjun Erigesi, Pragnanda Ramesh Babu, Nihal Sareen, Arvind Chidambaram, the list just goes on. But right now, one of them is firmly in the spotlight. That is Gukesh Dommaraju, the challenger for the 2024 World Championship. Still only 18 years old, he would be the youngest undisputed world champion in history. The most populous country in the world is at his back. Gukesh can enter the history books with Vishy Anand as the first two Indian world chess champions. And with the strong state of chess in India, they just won the chess Olympiad with a 95% score. Even world champions could follow in the years to come.
Και δεν έχουν κάτι τα μαύρα. Ναι, δεν φαίνεται κάτι εύκολο.
Gukesh
Πρέπει να θυσιάσει
Dommaraju.
αξιωματικό. Ξέρετε εδώ και δεν έχεις τον αξιωματικό. Ναι, να είχε ας πούμε μαυροτετράγωνο αξιωματικό, ναι. Δεν φαίνεται κάτι εύκολο τουλάχιστον.
To defeat Ding Liren, the current world champion, in this match. And wow, that's a great shot, Judith. This aerial view.
Άλεξ, σε ποιο site το είδες αυτό που λες τους γράφει προς το τέλος?
They have all the reasons to do so, I must say, because the game is heating up and every move has its strategical point and sometimes tactical point as well. So now, again already,
Στο chess.com δεν το βρήκα.
Actually, a4 should not have to be a surprising move for him, because after knight e5 there was two options, right? a4, which you said immediately, instantly, and we are talking about it, and f4, which would be the move which was kind of knight e5 was played to provoke f4.
Όχι, δεν βλέπω link στο chat.
Για να δω. There are questions, of course, because first question is whether Black will want to play a5 to allow a6 and stabilize there.
Όχι, δεν έχει βγει link. Μήπως υπάρχει κάποια ρύθμιση που δεν αφήνει να μπουν link. Δεν ξέρω, δεν το έχω τσεκάρει.
Yes, then of course Black has to react. Can he play a5 in this position? Because that seems to be the most natural move to be playing.
Αλλά δεν βλέπω link. Τουλάχιστον με το θ3 εννοώ να μείνει στα λευκά ή όχι. Εννοείς σε αυτή τη θέση? Από ό,τι φαίνεται μάλλον όχι. Έπαιξε όμως, τι έπαιξε, πύργο. Μάλιστα.
Funny note, the b pawn for black still has yet to move in this entire match, but I feel like that trend is going to end very shortly. At some point, that b pawn, it simply has to be pushed, or maybe there's going to be a capture, right?
Well, actually, after a5, I think black would not go for a6. Black's plan is to play b6. So he really wants to.
Θέλει να παίξει εδώ και μετά να παίξει γ5. Μάλιστα.
So actually, his next move wants to be b6. Very straightforward. I want to go b6, c5.
Και τι μπορεί να παίξει ο Liren τώρα εδώ?
Where are you going to be moving? And if it has to be moving away, then black can take over in this game. So this is the big question. How can white stop that?
Αυτό εδώ.
Stop black from playing b6 and c5. This is the big question right now.
Α5.
And that means that Ding will have to answer that question, and he knows what's coming. Rook c8 is not a move you play just to be on a different square than a8. I mean, b6, c5. I think that Gukesh is finding his flow in this game, and looking at him right now, he does seem like a pretty confident and poised individual. But for Ding, now it's a big question once more. Is it f4? Do you kick that knight away right now? Do you actually hold that move back? Speaking of restraint, instead of just attacking a knight when you can, maybe bring in a rook to c1, an idea that we keep discussing. And rook f to c1 definitely would be the preferred rook at the moment, because if black is indeed going to push some of these queenside pawns, you want more of your rooks on that side of the board. And for Gukesh, the follow-up, is it going to be knight e4?
Alex, μάλλον δεν ξέρω πώς δεν αφήνει link το chat. Ίσως είναι κάποια αριθμός που πρέπει να κοιτάξω.
It just goes to show that with every single turn played, the position changes bit by bit, and you have to account for all of these nuances.
Absolutely. Small details is all about in this game, I must say, but it became very concrete. It is very interesting that how Gukesh
Αδρέα, δεν θες να βάζεις τα πιόνια σου στο χρώμα του μοναδικού αξιωματικού σου οικειοθελώς. Θες ανοιχτές τις διαγωνίους για να κινείται, ναι. Ποκούρκλους.
No, but with Gukesh we always see something very
Σταματίου, Παπαϊωάννης, Οδόρου.
plan. So he
Παυλίδης,
went knight
Βασίλης,
e5 in
Πανίκας,
order to play
Κοτονιάς,
b6 c5.
Πολτάς,
a4, I don't care, I go rook c8, I want to go
Τσανάκης.
b6. So a5 is played, and
Θεοδόρου και Κούρκουλο
I
θα
would be
έλεγα.
surprised if b6 would not come
Μάλλον.
very fast. Or at least that's the move which is...
Δεν τους ξέρω όλους βέβαια.
Question, Judith, because b6, while it's clear you
Αλλά
want
θα έλεγα
c5
Θεοδόρου ή
next, I was
Κούρκουλος.
wondering what happens if white replies with, okay, first trading. Let's bring up an analysis board just so we can sort of show everybody the questions that I'm about to ask. b6 makes so much sense to me, but I'm wondering if we do get a trade, I'm not sure if I need to include it, but and we get f4 going, if you retreat your knight somewhere, I will play b5, and then I have a c6
Θα δούμε όμως.
at my disposal. So what is the idea here from your perspective for black?
Well, first of all, I'm not completely sure that you're going to be capturing on b6.
Στο χρόνο είναι ίδιο, κοίτα εδώ. Μόλις κοίταξα, ήταν σχεδόν ίδιο. 1 ώρα 2 και 45 για τον Gukesh.
Much has changed, even though knight c4 maybe is possible.
Ah, okay.
Maybe c4 is possible instead of knight g6. But
I
okay,
really
let's...
love that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think we're both coming to the same like realization because you said
Το
knight
Gukesh,
c4.
αυτό προσπαθεί από ό,τι
This
φαίνεται
position
με
is
μελλοντικό
the
β6 γάμα 5.
for
Ναι,
knight
κάτι
c6.
τέτοιο
I
σκέφτεται
don't
το
wanna allow
Gukesh.
a knight up there with rook a7 and all sorts of active play. So
Η αλήθεια είναι ότι
knight
του
c4,
δημιουργεί
I think
προβλήματα
that's
ο
it.
ύπος στο Δ4.
I'm not sure this is completely over, but it seems like knight on c6 is a fantastic outpost for the knight, and after queen d6, maybe rook
Έχουν
a7 to
κινήσεις.
stop the knight e7 move.
And knight a4, b6 is loose. This just feels much more fun
Κοίταξε
to play
τώρα,
from the white side.
εγώ θα παίζα α5.
Yes, it can
Αν
be
ήμουν
dangerous, but
ο
let's see what
Liren.
the other move I mentioned, knight c4, and highlight why it is something that to be considered, because bishop c4, d takes c4, queen c4 I think is not possible to c5 for tactical reasons, and when the move, the knight has to move away, either after b takes c, then bishop d3 would gain and win some material.
Really nice find by you, and I think this is one of those tactics that's, I mean, for me at least,
Λοιπόν,
easy to miss from a distance.
Έπαιξε
But when you
α5.
said knight c4, I'm like,
Ωραία.
of course, the d3 square is so vulnerable. You've prepared with b6 and c5, so you can give up a pawn for now to win even more material. That's a really good spot.
Σε μερικές
by you
κινήσεις
because
θα
I think,
νομίζω θα
this
ξεκαθαρίσει
is one
περισσότερο
of
το
those
τοπίο.
moments where you might say, I can't do this. I'm going to be a little bit passive, but no, actually, you can press forward, and this would, of course, be good for Gukesh.
But there are very interesting ideas and
παίζεται
tactics
το
around
β6,
the
εντάξει,
game.
οκ.
Because, for example, while I was thinking that after b6 takes, let's say,
Και εδώ δεν προτείνω να το φάει. Α,
white cannot wait until
γι' αυτό.
black plays f5. But let's say if I go b5, and only after c5 I go f4. Is this very crazy or it's possible?
Τώρα εδώ.
So C takes
Όχι, τώρα
D,
παίζουν τα μαύρα.
F takes
Ας
D.
πούμε
We're
ότι
getting
παίζουν
all sorts of knights
τι.
captured by pawns. Takes, captures here.
Αχα.
And now the question is,
Υπάρχει και
is
αυτό.
this pawn somehow valuable? Can I throw it forward? But I know you're going to take on g7 and open up the black
Ας
king.
πάει στο ίδιο.
Now we're talking about spicy chess.
I mean, maybe you go d4. I don't know. It's just getting crazy.
D4, not even on my radar there, but just throwing more pawns forward, and crazy is an understatement.
FG7, king g7. And we have b6 on the board. Look at that.
Έπαιξε.
It's getting sharp.
Α, έπαιξε β6. Για να δούμε.
I like these variations because they we can see the evaluation bar, which by the way is still in the middle in this exact line, but for the players, they have to assess this kind of position properly. So if you are a Ding, you're like, okay, this C3 pawn is too scary for me. I don't want to allow a pawn all the way this far, getting closer and closer to the other side. And if you're Gukesh, you're like, well, my king is exposed. That's pretty open. I don't want to deal with that. And then it becomes a matter of style and preference and also proper evaluation, which is exceedingly difficult. So as we see in the live board, b6 has been played. I see you, John. I know you've been just watching all these moves unfold. But John, I mean, we have turned this game, well, the players have, from a quiet affair, and now they're about to start throwing some punches.
Το πύργο πρέπει να τον διώξει από εκεί για να πάει σε πυρούνι με τον ύπο στο γάμα 6.
A very quiet position, suddenly everywhere you look, there are sharp lines everywhere if you're not deviating from a straight and narrow path.
Και να πάει βέβαια εδώ, μπορεί να τον φέρει εδώ.
The game is continuing to go in. But Robert, if we were to compare this game to
παίρνει την αλφα ο λευκός. Ναι, αν φάει παίρνει την αλφα και μπορεί να τον φέρει εδώ, ας πούμε, να σκυπήσει εδώ. Και μετά εγώ μπορεί να δυναμώσει λίγο το stream, εννοείς αυτούς εδώ ή τη δικιά μου φωνή. Δικιά μου φωνή νομίζω, θα βάλω το μικρόφωνο πιο κοντά αν δεν ακούγομαι καλά. Αν εννοείς αυτούς, ναι.
He played 95 when we were like, how would you allow f4 with
του chess, okay.
Then he went rook c8 calmly and now b6. I'm really enjoying the flow of the game, at least from the last few moves.
Και την γάμα ο μαύρος.
Very committal, but it looks like it's not on the board just yet. Plenty of stuff to talk about here as we get ready to hop into our next break here at the FIDE World Championship. But why not use this break to take advantage of today being Black Friday? Because this Black Friday we are hooking everybody up. That's all of you who are watching with 50% off.
Θα φύγουνε πάντως, λογικά θα έχουμε ανταλλαγές, θα φύγουνε κάποια πιόνια, θα φύγουνε. Γεια σου φωνή, καλά είναι, thank you. Οκ, bro. Πείτε άμα είναι δυνατά ή παραπάνω ή... Τώρα το έχω στο 10, πώς το βάλα, 16%.
So, folks, the b7 pawn, after 4 rounds, has finally made its way off its starting square. He is just that chill guy. What can we say? We will be back with more from the FIDE World Championship right after this break.
I'm joined by Gukesh Dommaraju. You might know him as Gukesh D, or you might know him as Gukesh. Thank you so much for joining me. Yeah. You don't play online at all. Like you don't play in these like events that much.
Yeah, very rarely.
Why? I'm not trying to get you to do it, but I'm sort of fascinated you don't do it almost at all.
I guess I don't have the same feeling as I play with the board. Not saying it's bad or anything. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people like it and it's perfectly fine, but for me personally it's just not as enjoyable and not as intense as board the board chess.
Is it kind of interesting for you that it's when you play the team events and you're sort of coming up together, it's like the squad, but all these events are individual events ultimately. The most important events are individual. Is it a little bit hard to strike the balance, or for you it's just your friends off the board and when you play it's...
I wouldn't say we are like really close friends off the board, but okay, we have good relations pretty much everyone and apart from the time
Πολλούς θέλει να πάει εδώ, αλλά γιατί να πας εδώ?
We have a very normal relationship, but
και του δίνει και προβάδισμα.
When it comes to chess,
αν τον φας,
it's fully competitive. There's no friendship on the board, so.
At the elite tennis level,
και αν φάει πίσω,
the top 20 are all the same level in tennis.
Εδώ.
They can all beat each other. It's all mental.
Και απειλεί να φάει εδώ ανοίγοντας τέτοιο.
I'm sure mentality plays a huge role, but I wouldn't say it's all mentality. I mean, I guess there are different styles and also it depends on, you know, certain styles match, suit better against certain opponents and stuff like that. But surely mentality plays a huge role. I really focus on physical fitness. I do something, either sports or some workout, yoga every day.
But what is something that you do in your life that you love but you're very bad at?
I love tennis.
Okay.
But
θα πέφτει αυτό.
Quite bad.
Μάλιστα.
Okay. Me too.
Τώρα τα 4 και 4 και Κωνσταντινέ, ναι. Έτσι θα είναι 2 hanging pawns του μαύρου αμφίσιμα ως προς την εξέλιξη. Στην επόμενη ιδέα, εάν ο μαύρος πύργος ανέβει στο γ7, λες εδώ προφανώς, ναι. Πιόνι τρώει στο β6. Πιόνι τρώει πίσω. Εντάξει. Όμως είναι nuance game που λέμε. Για να γίνει καλύτερος βασικά δεν πρέπει να φάει εδώ. Ναι. Δεν πρέπει να φάσει εδώ και καλά. Αλλά όχι. Πάνω κάτω το ίδιο είναι. Πίσω. Για να δούμε.
I always believed that the ideas of the past could be extremely helpful. Well, the classical heritage.
Επιστρέφω, παιδες.
We're here with world champion Grandmaster Vishy Anand, and what we really want to know, we've all seen the video of Gukesh in Prague standing up when you stood up, but if Gukesh wins the world championship, are you going to have to stand up when he stands up?
No.
All right, Gukesh, you don't get that honor, but I'm sure Vishy's still rooting for you.
Does that mean when Gukesh makes a move and he stands up to go into the break room, we have to stand up here as well? I feel like there are so many unanswered questions there. Absolutely love the content, Mike. Keep it up. Very tense now in this position in game number 4 of the FIDE World Championship. Judith, we've talked a lot about really sharp tactical variations that can arise from this position, especially now that b6 has been played on the board. But I think especially for myself and other club level players, when we look at this position and we're asking ourselves, where do we want our pieces to be as white or black? Are there certain themes that you can pick out in this position for what white and black's long-term plans are here?
Well, right now I believe that white not necessarily going to be thinking about long-term plan. It becomes very concrete plans what he should be doing, because there is a very concrete threat white has to deal with and react on that, because once the black pawn is pushing c5, white has to understand what are the dangers, but it is getting very tactical right now. So there are big questions for Ding.
Okay, so imminent c5 coming in on the board and having to calculate what we want to be doing off the back of that is probably what is sending him into this think right now. Pretty similar times on the clock, 59 minutes, basically an hour, plays 52 as things currently stand. It is Ding Liren to move on move 16 of round number 4. Robert, Judith, I pass it back over to you.
Complicated,
Thanks so much, John. I mean, setting the tone for the rest of this game. And Judith, during the break, we're just spitballing different ideas back and forth. So I feel like we didn't even look at it on the board. We were just doing the analysis in our heads. Maybe we should kind of dive into some details here, because this is a critical moment for Ding Liren. He needs to find an active plan, because Gukesh is bringing the heat, at least on the queen side. So if we can bring up an analysis board and dive in a bit, we can discuss certain themes here on the queen side that are going to be a bit more ambitious. So the move I had suggested at least was a6.
Αυτό κοίταγα μόλις, Δημήτρη.
Rook on c8. So I guess
αν παίξει β5 θα έχει γάμα 5.
Rook c7.
Λοιπόν, για να δούμε τι
And
λέει ο
here I wanted to
Κωνσταντίνος.
play f4, and this is where I think the questions only begin.
Exactly, I was kind of surprised on your move bishop a6, but definitely this is one of the moves which has to be considered by Ding. And not only that bishop a6 itself, but also one of the biggest questions before that is to capture on b6 first with the pawn or without that. And you have your reasons why you didn't capture that pawn. Exactly. So after f4, yeah, the question is whether is black going to be moving anyway to c4 with the knight. So maybe we can point out what was your real idea behind f4 after bishop a6. Is to take, and after queen takes, after c5, you have an intermediate. Great move, knight c3 to b5, right? This was your plan.
Exactly, and I think I've been inspired by you this whole time. And oh, wow, Ding just made a retreating move, knight to f3, so he's not actually pressing forward on the queen side, but these were the types of variations that you and I were talking about, where you leave a knight hanging on d4 because the rook on c7 is loose, and there's all sorts of tactics.
And it also seems good for white, suddenly, because if black goes back to c8, then your point comes alive that you didn't want to exchange the pawns on b6. So knight a7, and white is gaining material, because after capturing c takes d4, you take everything on c8, a takes b6, and there are too many passed pawns for white.
Και πάει για παράδειγμα στο γάμα 4.
Black is toast at this point because of
the
passed pawns and the Rook versus the minor piece dynamic. It's not the biggest storyline when the pawn just 2 squares away from promotion. But Judah, there's neither here nor there, because all of these lines that you and I were talking about in the few minutes of the break, knight f3 played instead by Ding. He just backs that knight up. So I guess at your first instinct, do you approve of this decision from Ding? Do you think it's a too quiet of an approach? What do you make of his decision to back that knight up?
Κάνει ο Liren με απευθείας β5.
Well, that knight was afraid of c5.
Ναι, μετά είναι το γάμα 5. Ήταν λίγο δύσκολα μετά.
And it's a kind of a prophylactic.
Δυσκολεύει λίγο η κατάσταση.
Black is playing pushing c5 and after that d4 with great energy. He wants to eliminate a very active knight which was put there just 2 moves ago into the center, this knight on e5. So now black is asked, what are you going to be doing with your knight? Are you going to be exchanging on f3 and play a solid line where on the queen side it can be still better for white the situation, especially if white can keep the tension back. But we have to check that. The other question is, what if knight c4 anyway?
Πώς να δέσω ώστε να ρεμίσουν τα πράγματα στην πτέρυγα της βασίλισσας. Παίρνεις αρκετό έλεγχο έτσι εδώ, ναι. Με τους 2 πύρους εδώ έχεις αρκετά καλό έλεγχο. Και δεν υπάρχει κάποια επίθεση εδώ, τουλάχιστον για την ώρα, έτσι όπως είναι η θέση. Λαμπρινό και εγώ αν δεν τα βάλω εδώ, είναι αλλιώς να τα σκέφτεσαι στο μυαλό και λέω, άμα το βλέπεις εδώ είναι πιο εύκολο. Λοιπόν, τι έπαιξε? Πήγε πίσω με τον ύπο. Πήγε εδώ ο Liren.
d6 is kind of interestingly placed. White cannot go e4, b5 also not so easy, but actually maybe b5 is possible. Let's say maybe AB happens and then b5, but maybe also white doesn't not have to rush. But I would try it first. Let's say b5. I don't know if I can go
Ωραία,
there.
φαίνεται, αν πώς θα εξελιχθεί.
And
πήγε πίσω με τον ύπο, οπότε δεν πήρε κανένα ρίσκο εδώ, τίποτα. Okay. Θέλει να δει τι θα γίνει με τον αξιωματικό, ο οποίος με τον ύπο, συγγνώμη, και έχουμε την ανταλλαγή εδώ, εντάξει. Οπότε είχαμε κάποιες ανταλλαγές, φύγανε ύποι. Μάλιστα. Έφυγε ο δυνατός ύπος του Liren, ο οποίος βέβαια κάποια στιγμή θα είχε θέμα με το Γ5 και έφυγε και ο ύπος από το ε5 του Gukesh.
in the game, it looks like
Μάλιστα.
we saw a capture on f3 rather than the knight rotating about. And after bishop takes f3, the big question is, can white get in this b5
Ξέρω, εγώ προτιμώ τα μαύρα εδώ,
to break down
για να είμαι
the pawns?
ειλικρινής.
And will black say, I'm going to beat you to the
Ποια
punch,
θέση
and I'm
είναι?
going to play d4 and just try to get rid of potential weaknesses?
Well, d4 seems at first comes to mind, but after d4, the good move, I think, knight
Εγώ εδώ
e2.
προτιμώ τα μαύρα, για να είμαι ειλικρινής.
Oh, we know about good knight e2 moves in this match,
θέλω να
don't we?
κάνω
That
το
was
55 να
Gukesh
βρεις
in
πάρα
game
πολύ.
3 with the lovely knight e2 retreating. And what's the ultimate idea here from your point of view? The knight e2 just challenges this pawn, of course, but what transformation do you see benefiting, I guess, either white or black?
Well, for black, it's a question right now whether does he have to take on e3, exchange the pawns, and after e3, white has a more pleasant position.
Εγώ να περνάει στις γυναίκες
and
παγκόσμιο
knight
τα
to
βρίσκω
d4
εδώ καμιά φορά.
back probably, or rook
Αν
c1
μετά
and
από
put
υπόγαμμα
pressure on the
4
c5.
πήγω α2
So
έχει ο μαύρος
this would be
15.
something I think
Ενώ στην
Ding would be happy
προηγούμενη
with. Not that he
θέση,
has such a huge advantage, but I think it's more pleasant.
εδώ μάλλον.
But and we have d4 on the board. He wanted to simplify.
Yeah, the
Πήρε
position we have in the analysis board, knight
για να
e2 played.
ελέγξει
So
αυτό,
if
αν
d
έχει
takes
ο μαύρος
e3 and it's captured back, then we
β5.
will get this position we're analyzing. So, I mean, Judith, small pluses here for white, and the knight coming back to
Τώρα
d4.
εδώ δέλτα 4. Ναι, έπαιξε δέλτα 4. Κωνσταντίν έπαιξε κατευθείαν δέλτα 4. Και μάλιστα το έπαιξε και γρήγορα.
Black just puts that bishop on e4 and says, let's keep trading pieces. Does white have legitimate chances here, or do you think
και ύπο.
manipulation
Οπότε
should
είχαμε
allow
ύπο
black to fully
ε2.
utilize?
Πηλώντας πίσω.
I like bishop e4 very much at this
Πίσω
point
ε8.
for black.
Τώρα και εγώ προτιμώ το μαύρο.
Powerful exchange.
Ναι, Δημήτρη, προτιμώ τα μαύρα. Θα δούμε. Βέβαια, εντάξει, η αξιολόγηση ακόμα δεν μας δίνει κάτι. Λοιπόν, έφαγε εδώ, Μάλιστα. Οπότε είχαμε και αυτή την ανταλλαγή. Ξεκαθαρίζει λίγο το τοπίο εδώ. Άνοιξε η δέλτα. Τώρα ο μαύρος έχει 3 έναντι 2 στη τέργα της βασίλισσας. Ο λευκός έχει το έξτρα παραπάνω πιόνι στο κέντρο. Για να δούμε. Αυτός ο αξιωματικός πραγματικά για τα λευκά μου έχει κάτσει. Είναι πολύ ενοχλητικός. Δηλαδή δεν έχεις το Β1, ξέρω εγώ, δεν έχεις το Γ2. Για να δούμε τώρα. Τώρα άνοιξε η κατάσταση κάπως.
I mean, the one question that I'm having in my head is, did Ding Liren have a little bit more if he was playing a bit more ambitiously? But I guess, Judith, a few moves ago when he went knight back to f3, started the sequence of trades. Do you think that the game 3 loss plays a part in his decision-making here in game 4? He didn't want a tactical skirmish. He instead said, let me just be very solid.
Δεν ξέρω.
Actually, I don't think so. It's because of his loss in game 3.
Αν ξέρω, Ιρανή, ναι.
That he won game 1 and in game 2 he was so solid and he agreed to a draw where Magnus was just about to start the game.
Είναι αυτός ο αξιωματικός πραγματικά είναι πολύ ενοχλητικός.
I think in this game, I mean, knight f3 showed very clearly. I don't know if it was
Όλα αυτά εδώ που ελέγχει είναι πολύ ενοχλητικά.
But it was a very logical continuation from Ding's part that he didn't want to sharpen the game out at all. And he went into the most solid liquidation in the position. He has experience in a World Championship match. We should not forget that he has been there, ups and downs, and he knows exactly half a point is just as good as, I mean, not as a win, but he knows exactly how painful is a loss, so he does not have to burn bridges yet in the match. So there is nothing wrong with that, I believe, to play solid at this point.
And I would second that and say, especially because Ding's openings from the black side, I mean, he won game 1 in a French, a sharp game. Then in 2 days ago in game 3, after, what was it, 15 moves, he was even better because Gukesh misstepped with g5. So it was really sharp. He spent a lot of time, and that game was one that either side could have come out on top in. But ultimately, it was Gukesh evening up the match. So I'm just trying to understand some of the decision making right now. This game, Judith, it looks very level. I'm just going to say it. I won't be surprised if they shake hands in quite the near future because pieces are coming off the board.
Well, it may be something that the players would like to agree to a draw, but they are not allowed to agree to a draw unless, before 40, unless they are going to make a repetition of moves. But there is a great chance that it will end
λέτε να
in
πάμε
a draw this
ισοπαλία.
game. That's very clear now that we have a simplification of pair of knight and now pair of pawns, and now we are going to see a pair of bishops to be exchanged. So there is a very good chance, and we can see also on the players that Gukesh feels very comfortable with his position.
Ναι, Θοδωρή. Τώρα βέβαια ο Gukesh θέλει να διώξει τους αξιωματικούς. Σκέφτεται να πάει για ισοπαλία ίσως.
Really much more active.
Δεν το περίμενα αυτό.
Of course, on the queen side,
Και τι
having
παίζει
the
ο
pawn,
Liren?
b4 and a5,
Μάλιστα.
it's a little bit more comfortable, more promising for white.
Okay.
But because of the simplification, I don't think there much can be done by white. Played rook fd1, I see, pushing away the queen to e7, I believe. That's the most natural spot for the queen right now.
Looks very solid, and queen e7 played, and I just want to highlight that feature chat that was up there a second ago, saying that Gukesh has also been great with the black pieces. So while the games when Gukesh is white have resulted in decisive battles, when Ding is white, it feels like, okay, Gukesh was slightly worse in game 2. You said Magnus was like, oh, that was a dream type of world championship position from his perspective. He would have loved to get that out of the early stages. But here in game 4, Gukesh, it looked maybe a little bit uncomfortable for him from our vantage point. But from where he's seated in Singapore, Gukesh has everything under control. So yeah, I have to give the youngster a lot of credit. His team working very hard, but he seems to be super solid.
But also somehow I have the feeling, you know, that Gukesh's strategy is to play extremely stable with the black side, to stabilize himself, that no, Ding, whatever you do, you cannot crack me with white. And then let's see when I'm with the white color, how much I'm going to be pushing.
Ενδεχομένως να πάει για ισοπαλία.
And there where we're going to have those battles. And it would be a smart idea, of course. And of course, it's not such an easy strategy to execute. But it seems so far that it is something that will work for him.
And when Gukesh is white, he surprises Ding with g4 ideas. And when Ding is white, he surprises Gukesh with ideas in the A file. First, that pawn push to A5 in game 2, and then here in game 4 with bishop A3. So we're sort of seeing a bit of a theme. I'm not going to read too much into it, but at least in these first 4 games, 2 with each color, we can see where the players are aiming and how they're reacting.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we see that the games where Ding is playing with the white pieces so far it is steered to very solid, very positional way, while when Ding is playing with the black color, somehow it sharpens out whatever happens.
Και μόλις κινηθεί.
So solid play is the name of the game for Ding Liren when he has the white pieces. And for Gukesh, I don't think he's going to complain, because in the candidates, how Gukesh even got here, he was just outplaying people. He didn't take too many risks, with the exception being the game against Abbasov, where he like brought his knight back to h7, and it was maybe a dubious opening, but one that he knew very well. There was, I don't call it dubious, that actually feels a little bit too extreme, but it was not some kind of mainline theory that he was trotting out. But the point overall, I would say, is that Gukesh just typically plays very principled chess, and he doesn't seem to fear anybody. And that's a great characteristic from a youngster, because sometimes you face off against the Ding Lirens, the Magnus Carlsens, and you think about how much success they've had throughout the years. But I don't think Gukesh cares. I mean, we've seen him in the Olympia 2 in a row. That's like the biggest stage, where in 2022 in Chennai, and then this recent one that was in your native Hungary, he played with great success and in this case led India to a gold medal. So I really just believe that he fears nobody and he is a confident youngster who knows that he can compete on equal terms with pretty much any top player.
Yes, indeed. You can see his self-confidence and understanding about what is the situation. If he was able to win the candidates, he could make this fantastic performance and play in Budapest at the Olympiad. He understands that if he has a good preparation, if he has a good opening choice, if he is going to be playing very well, the maximum of his potential, then he is capable of winning the match. And this is what he said also in the press conference. That in that case, he has all the chances to win. Whether, no matter what kind of thing, what form
το 85 είναι τετράγωνο για τον ύπο, οπότε δεν νομίζω Z3.
It is very important to point out that it is for the public also. It's known that he's working very much on his mental attitude and strength, that he can stay in the reality, in the presence, and control himself not to get overexcited on a victory or too much disappointment on a loss. And maybe this is the most important in a world championship match, that whatever happens, you go with it and you stay under control whatever happens, and you don't break in any moment. And even though he's very young, he's a very young player, he can show this stability. Though I have to say that in some points in game one, it was clear that he made some fast moves, some time management. At some point, it's not so good when things were shifting around. And also, yes, in game three, it was very interesting for me when he was already winning and Ding had like less than a minute.
Ναι, έχει την πλειοψηφία στην πέργα της Βασίλισσας. Απλά ο Liren δεν θέλει την ισοπαλία γιατί παίζει με τα λευκά. Αυτό είναι το πρόβλημα. Αυτό είναι το θέμα. Αλλά
αν μου πεις
και στο δεύτερο γύρο έτσι ήταν.
So excited that he couldn't control himself.
Το θέμα είναι μπορεί ο Liren να πάρει κάτι περισσότερο με τα μαύρα.
So fast that it showed that he's so excited.
Πήρε νίκη στον πρώτο γύρο.
Speaking, I think he can control his emotions and
μπορεί να το ξανακάνει όμως.
Himself very well and stay very much in the game, which I think he can actually reach to this point also, because we see him meditating or closing his eyes and put himself very much into focus. I think this must help him also.
Yeah, no, he is so mature, Gukesh, just the way he plays. And I was just thinking while you were speaking about a recent loss of his that I remember against Andrejkin in the European Club Cup. And Gukesh does not lose frequently. He did lose that game, and I remember the opening was a bit uncomfortable for him. He was taking some time, and then his pawn structure was ruined on the king side. He ended up dropping a pawn, and the game got out of hand for him eventually. But I think that Ding does need to pose some challenges that are static for Gukesh, like give him double pawns at some point. Try to outplay him in those kind of end games, because the way that this game has gone today, I've been very impressed with how Gukesh has been able to handle the pressure. And I think more of what happened in game two, that's really, I think, where Ding can shine, because when he gets these small pluses, of course, Gukesh is phenomenal, and he is not just going to lose a game because his opponent is slightly better. But I think that for Ding, that's the type of style
Α3 στο V6, Α3 στο V6, είχαμε ανταλλαγή εδώ.
I mean, to press the youngster, it's such a big stage, Judith. I feel like he's settling in very nicely, but the World Championship is new to him, and there could be a moment where he just feels that discomfort, and then suddenly that's when Ding can pounce. So I think Ding needs to show some ambition with his white games, but of course I trust his team more than I trust my own words.
Well, it's easier said than done that he has to press. I think it is very clear that this was his idea, that in his first white game in game two, he came with a very interesting novelty with this A5 idea, provoking Gukesh, that, okay, come and take my pawn and let's see how it works out. I have my prep. And there also Gukesh was going into the direction that, okay, maybe I'm going to have a little worse position, I have to defend whatever, but I go in that path. And today's game, it's exactly the same, I think, what Ding had. He had a very similar strategy, that I want to play not very tactical, very concrete position. I want to be more positional. And maybe you're too young or very young, you want to be very active, you will make a choice when there is a decision to be solid or to go on an interesting idea. Maybe you will do that, and then that's where I'm going to have my chances. And Gukesh did not fall into these provocations, and he played very healthy, he played very active this game. Especially I like very much knight e5 move, which was at the point where he could go many other different kind of more passive plan. He chose this one, and he plays very calmly. And as far as I see now that knight c3 was played, it seems like this knight last time from c3 went to e2, and that's when I said that it's a draw for by Ding. Now I'm saying that from e2 to c3 the knight goes. And it's kind of a draw for, I believe.
And this game for sure is going to end with a split point. And part of the reason why Jude and I have been talking and not analyzing so much is because of moves like this. Knight c3, the knights get traded, some rooks may get traded, and there's just not enough material.
Άμα φύγουν οι ήποι, εντάξει, με τις βασίλισσες ακόμα παίζει, αλλά δύσκολο, εντάξει, σε αυτό το επίπεδο.
Black has an extra pawn here on the queen side, the c pawn, and white has a nice extra pawn in the center. But we will see mass liquidation, and as you said, no draw offers directly, but you can repeat moves. So I think that's what the players are thinking about right now. How do we actually head towards that draw if they're trying to make it before the 40th turn?
Ενώ φαινόταν δυναμική παρτίδα μέχρι κάποιο σημείο.
Yes, I mean after the knight exchange, and it is kind of logical by Ding that he wants to exchange the knights, because the black knight simply stands very good on e4, right? It's just the most optimal place for the black knight, putting pressure on the f2 pawn and being very active in the center. So now the question is for Gukesh how to simplify the position that it's going to be a draw. At the same time, you can also say that he cannot just play without paying attention, because you still have to make the best move, not to spend, let's say, needless energy to spend if there would be a simplification. Let's say everything goes very badly for black, and the two black pawns will be exchanged for the only one white pawn. And even that position is without queens and only one rooks on the board. It's still a draw, right? But that's not somehow that he wants to make a simplification. I'm just saying that there is very, very little chance for
ανοίγουν το βασιλιά, τα πολυπαίζουν κορυφαίοι. Ναι, για να μην υπάρχουν τα σάκ διαγώνου. Βέβαια τώρα δεν υπάρχουν αξιωματικοί, δεν υπάρχει μαύρο rounds, αλλά εντάξει, υπάρχει βασίλισσα ακόμα μέσα. Ζωσμένο και σήμερα ο Liren και που λέει στο έχει ξαφνικά πάλι μια ισοπαλία. Ναι, Βασίλη, δεν το περίμενα, σου πω την αλήθεια. Περίμενα κάτι να γίνει στο μέσον εκεί. Αλλά κατάφερε ο Gukesh κάπως και το έφερε εκεί που ήθελε, νομίζω. Αν θα μείνουμε βασίλισσες χωρίς πύργους, το φινάλε κερδίζεται με ένα πιόνι από τον μαύρο. Αν καταφέρει να το προχωρήσει, ναι. Δεν νομίζω βέβαια ότι θα φτάσουμε μέχρι εκεί. Ενώ ο Gukesh έχει σχέδιο που οδηγεί στη νίκη, ο Liren δεν έχει τίποτα. Δεν του βγήκε βασικά.
The 4-on-3 that are all on the king side, that would still be a theoretically drawn position. So no matter what kind of mistake you can try to draw up here, it still is going to result in a level position. So
εντάξει, ο Gukesh μια χαρά, ξανά ισοπαλία με τα μαύρα.
Really been in serious danger in this game. Knight e5 was a really nice find from him that was not on my radar.
Και αύριο να πιέσει για την νίκη για να πάρει το προβάδισμα. Εντάξει, έχει τώρα χρόνο, θα σκεφτεί μήπως μπορεί να πάρει κάτι παραπάνω.
You don't want to assume. You definitely do not want to make a quick move and just say, no matter what I do, nothing can go wrong. That's how you lose games.
Μόλις φύγουν και είπε από το παιχνίδι, τότε με το παραπάνω ποιος δεν παίζει βασίλισσες. Γιατί μάλλον από αυτά. Ναι, αν κάποιος διεκδικεί,
they're not pretending.
Αυτά θα είναι μόνο τα μαύρα, Ανδρέα.
How do we get there as safely?
Απλά νομίζω σε αυτό το επίπεδο μπορεί να πάρει την ισοπαλία ο Liren. Δεν θα είναι.
Sorry that we got this simplification and not the bishop a6.
Μπορεί να πατήσω Liren έτσι. Ούτε εγώ, Δημήτρη. Και μ' άρεσε στην αρχή το άνοιγμα που έπαιξε, να σου πω την αλήθεια.
And pushing the knight back to g6, because those positions were extremely interesting and could sharpen out very easily.
Κάπου εδώ νομίζω.
But of course it's completely understandable that Ding wanted to continue to go into the direction of the very solid way. It's only game 4. So many things
Κάπου
will
εδώ,
be
ας πούμε,
happening in the future games, I believe.
Ή πιο πίσω.
Very early in this match, and you do want to feel your opponent out a little bit just to see how ambitious will they be. And for Ding,
κάπου εδώ, μετά από αυτό,
why he's the
έπαιξε
reigning champion. He beat
α5.
And for Gukesh, who won the games very impressively.
Κάποια στιγμή, αυτό που θα περίμενε να έχει παίξει κάποια στιγμή το Z4, είχε την ευκαιρία. Άμα τώρα ακριβώς σε ποια θέση ήταν νομίζω από τις κορυφαίες κινήσεις. Δεν θυμάμαι ακριβώς που ήταν. Ίσως και εδώ. Να είχε παίξει κάτι τέτοιο, ας πούμε, να δοκίμαζε κάτι από εδώ. Εντάξει, προτίμησε βέβαια να πάει στην πτέρυγα της βασίλισσας. Αλλά δεν βγήκε. Φύγανε οι...
Λοιπόν, τι είχαμε εδώ.
Ο Gukesh δεν έκανε την ανταλλαγή, λοιπόν. Έφερε τον πύργο εκεί και τώρα έχουμε αυτές τις ανταλλαγές.
Yeah, let's see how many moves
αλλά τώρα θα φύγουν και οι πύργοι, λογικά. Καλησπέρα, Αντώνη. Και μετά από ρεπό και να μην του βγαίνει του Liren άλλο 2 μέρες να ετοιμαστείς άλλο μία. Έλατε. Κοίτα, ξέρεις τι έγινε, ας πω. Αυτό που είχε προετοιμάσει ο Liren, ο Gukesh το ήξερε. Δηλαδή την παρτίδα αυτή με τον Wesley νομίζω από ό,τι κατάλαβα την ήξερε. Αυτό κατάλαβα. Οπότε δεν μπόρεσε να τον παγιδέψει εκεί. Με πύργος στα δέλτα 8, μήπως στο 6, 4. Ναι, αυτό παίχτηκε. Ναι, λες ότι θα πάμε έτσι και ισοπαλία. Αλλά δεν έπαιξε αυτό, βλέπω. Εδώ έπαιξε θήτα 3 ο Liren.
But still there has to be made some moves. And if you think about it, that of course when they didn't have this rule that you cannot offer a draw, then at this point with h3 Ding would have been offering a draw and the opponent would be accepting it. So these rules are making the game interesting most of the time.
Λένε ότι δεν μπορείς, λέει ένας κανόνας ότι δεν μπορούν πριν τη 40η κίνηση να κάνουν draw by agreement, κάτι τέτοιο. Κάτσε να το δω μια στιγμή να σου πω, να σας πω ακριβώς. Λοιπόν...
Of course not so easy. But black can play c5, let's say.
C5 for sure. There is an outside pass pawn that black can start rolling, and white will then have to trade the pawns, trade one pair of rooks.
Λοιπόν, players are not allowed to draw by agreement before move 41. Δεν μπορούν να είναι τελική ισοπαλία. Θα πρέπει να κάνουν 3 συνεχόμενες μάλλον.
Queen on e4 nicely centralized. And so I think that white will just focus his attention to stop that c-pawn from pushing too far.
Yes, I mean, some moves can come, let's say, following this position that black plays c5, white is capturing on c5, black captures back, then we see an exchange on d8 with the rooks, takes, white goes rook c1, black goes queen d5, let's say. We are simplifying all the one of pair of rooks, one pair, well, not one, but the queens we swap off, and of course it goes up to the simplification where they can agree to a draw. So this is the most likely what we are going to be seeing in.
Άμα τα αλλάξουν όλα, μαύρος έχει κερδισμένη θέση.
But then the queen on e4 is just so superb standing there. The queen is in the center.
Θα έχει το έξτρα πιόν εδώ στην πτέρυγα της βασίλισσας. Το κάνει ελεύθερο και κερδίσει.
B4 pawn, controlling some very important squares. C4, C2, protecting the C6 pawn. The D5 square can be
Είμαστε 25η κίνηση, οπότε ακόμα δεν μπορώ να κάνουμε συμφωνία τέτοια. Αλλά μπορώ να επαναλάβουν κινήσεις.
Rook could lift up the board and say get to G5. There would also be the outline of a checkmating attack. So of course Rook doesn't move like the arrow I've drawn, but if White were to be quite careless and the Black Rook could venture on over to the king side, that is how White could find himself in harm's way. So Ding Liren and Gukesh both, they're just trying to be as smooth as possible. You don't want to be reckless, but this position, it remains just completely even. And for Ding Liren, I wonder if in the press conference he will express some disappointment, or if he'll just say, my opponent played well. There really wasn't much to it other than that. But as we talked about, Jude, there were some moments where Ding could have played more ambitiously, but also it would have been more risky.
Press conference is always fun to listen how they react, but not only what they say,
Κάτσε πως σε ποια κίνηση θεωρώ ότι... Λοιπόν εδώ.
And even though Gukesh is...
Νομίζω αυτή ήταν η κίνηση. Ή πιο μετά.
I mean, he's saying similar things and he just shows his stability. Even then, of course, you understand when he loses.
Φάνηκε ότι εδώ ξέρει ακριβώς στην παρτίδα ο Gukesh με αυτή την κίνηση.
But still, of course, a chess player shows by the body language what they were playing on the board.
Και μετά έπαιξε και αυτό, ναι.
I think the big question for Ding, for example,
και μετά έπαιξε ακριβώς, η παρτίδα εξελίχθηκε όπως σε εκείνη την παρτίδα με του Σο, με τον Γύρι, μέχρι ένα σημείο, δεν θυμάμαι μέχρι που ήταν. Μέχρι εδώ ήταν, νομίζω. Θα το δώσω ανάλυση, δεν θυμάμαι τώρα ακριβώς. Οπότε κάπου εκεί κατάλαβε ο Liren ότι την προετοιμασία του πήγε μάλλον στράφη, γιατί ο άλλος γνωρίζει.
So I do believe that opening choices will take a very important role.
Γάμα 5, okay.
So for those risks that you mentioned, I mean, we'll see if they will continue in future games. Just so far, I feel like you're looking at a player here in Ding Liren who wants to find stability, and the topsy-turvy nature of a match is something that's not unfamiliar to him, because in the 2023 match, and you just saw him look over at Gukesh. I think that they're doing that quiet offer where they're like, okay, do you want that draw? Should, you know, can we make that draw? Because this position is even. So, John, I know that you've been sitting here watching all this unfold. I mean, this is very clearly an equal game. But, John, I mean, we now will see 2 games with white, 2 games with black. So they're going to be on completely even footing when you take colors into account as well.
Absolutely. This I actually wanted to ask you that question next, Robert, where we were going into this game saying, you know what, Ding Liren has had 2 games with the black pieces. Things have been equal. He's got an opportunity to press with white, but that's sort of been negated now. 2 games with white, 2 games with black on both sides.
Το ένα ζευγάρι πύργων έφυγε, έμεινε το πιόνι εδώ.
A relatively relaxed ending for both players. I guess my question for Judith here would be, when Ding Liren played knight f3 on move 16, was that almost like a psychological admission that this is where I stop pressing for a win as white here, or do you think that was somewhere else?
No, I think that that's a very good point, that knight f3 was where the simplification started, and that was a silent draw for kind of. Basically, Ding decided that after Gukesh played these last previous 3 very good
Εντάξει, δεν νομίζω να φτάσουμε μέχρι εκεί, Δημήτρη.
Straightforward going to c5. He didn't see anything very, very good for him in the complications, and then he decided that I go knight f3. We simplify the position. Game 4, still 10 to go.
Fair enough. And psychologically, Robert, I guess the game The chairs are playing each other at the moment, but it is worth asking the question, to what extent is this a missed opportunity by Team Ding to capitalize on the extra game as white? Do we feel like giving up equality basically out of the opening was a misstep from him? Do we feel like do we feel negative about that at all, or is this relatively expected? What should we be, how should we be reading into this?
I think that Team Ding, if anything, should just feel respectful of Gukesh, because they came up with an idea that he was not familiar with, and Gukesh responded accurately. And then there were moments where Ding could have pressed for more, and as we just see empty chairs, I just want to point out, it's funny to me the difference in size. Like, one chair looks absolutely ginormous and the other looks incredibly small. So it's just amusing that the players have their preferences in that way. But
it's all about the gaming chair.
I think that Gukesh would agree with that, but I don't think that Ding can be too unhappy. He didn't press for more. He didn't want to take that risk, and I think I trust him. He's the world champion. He's played a match before, and if he wants to save those risky moments for later in the match, who am I to blame him?
Fair enough. Yes, these the longer you wait, though, especially after winning game number 1, it does feel a little bit like a momentum shift. And when you get matches like this, even in the Olympiad, right, where you're playing different people every round, momentum is a thing. If you win and you keep winning, it buoys your confidence. Your team coalesces around you. It feels good. You're able to make better decisions. So to start with a win and then lose and then get into a position where you're neutralized with the white pieces, how does Ding go about not letting that affect him? Because we're not saying it will. He's a world champion and he's been in these sort of situations before, so he clearly knows how to deal with it. But I think maybe it's something that we don't think about as often because we're so focused on the moves on a chessboard.
It's really one of those questions, and when we talk about Ding Liren, is he the same Ding that he was in the past? And he, by his own admission, has not always been. I mean, we've seen him struggle, and we've seen moments where he just criticized himself. He was upset with some of the play in the Olympiad, for example, where he was not able to just nurse his advantages into full points, but he actually praised his own play. So there's the criticism, there's the admission that things are not going the way that he would like, but then there's also praise for his own play where he says, actually, I think my level has been high, I just haven't been able to put the finishing touches on those games.
That makes a lot of sense. And Judith, from Gukesh's point of view, he'll be taking solace here in saying, well, actually, with the black pieces, I was able to get into this position out of the opening. It should give him some confidence that he might be able to then push with white and feel very, very comfortable with black against Ding. This is going to be good for his psychology in the match.
Well, I think it's, of course, clearly a very good sign, and it assures his self-confidence for Gukesh if he knows that with the black side he's stable, even if he gets an unpleasant surprise in the opening, if he gets an unpleasant position like in game 2, but he's still focusing and he can find his way out from those difficult situations. So it increases his self-confidence. At the same time, of course, he knows exactly that this match is going to be so difficult and so challenging, and he will have to show with the white pieces then how to win and where to catch Ding. And Ding will not give his life so easily in any of the games, because the tension is there, and the tension will be increasingly high. But draws like this is a very natural flow of a match. I mean, if you think about it, in 2016 with Karyakin and Carlsen, they made one draw after another. And actually, it was Karyakin who won the first time, and it was the whole world collapsed in Magnus, I think, and he was shaken. So we don't know what kind of mental roller coaster and things the players are going through. Sometimes they blunder, like we've seen also with Gelfand and Anand match, where Gelfand won first, and next day he just trapped the queen of Gelfand. So things are going up and down, and I think this is what I'm expecting in this match also.
Thank you very much, Judith, and it certainly looks like it's going that way at the moment. Let's ask a practical question, something that we maybe didn't fully consider or go too deeply into, Robert. When we are looking to make the draw for this game, which we believe is inevitably going to come.
Ναι, μάλλον δεν γίνεται. Να μην έρθει σοπαλία.
Move 41, of course, we have to have a repetition of moves. Now, of course, you can make, I guess, not the best move in the position to invite your opponent to repeat moves, but you make a move that's too bad or too far from the best line, and then you run the risk of your opponent going, hang on a second, I've got an advantage now, I'm going to press. How do you choose the correct moment? Is there one on the board right now? Where are the players trying to maneuver to?
It's a funny time that you asked that question, because I see many ways for white to go wrong and to actually lose the game, because there is a problem for the white king. Its escape square is in the line of sight of this black queen. So even if it were white's turn, the c5 pawn is not actually hanging, because if you take that pawn on c5, I'll just draw this with arrows, if you take this pawn on c5, rook d1 check is going to be played. It's a deflection tactic. The white king can't escape. As I mentioned, the queen covers the h2 square, and so that if white were on the turn and took, the rook would have to take, and then you deflect that rook, and the queen would be lost on c5. I can put these moves on the board very quickly. It's not going to happen. But if you're not careful, if you just assume that everything is fine, even here, like queen c3, let's trade queens, because if the queens trade, it would be a draw. But the queens aren't going to trade for one another. Rook d1 check, the same exact tactic. The king can't escape.
Απλά αυτό τώρα δεν ξέρω γιατί το κάνανε, να μην μπορούν να πούνε ότι εντάξει, έληξε ισόπαλη παρτίδα και να πρέπει να κάνουν επανάληψη κινήσεων πριν τη 41η.
But they still exist. So always look at your king safety, what escape squares you have, and in this case, white doesn't have any, nor does black, but black's rook is the active one, whereas white's rook is just sitting and trying to stop that c-pawn.
So a couple of tactics left in the position if white isn't careful. They're just trying to maneuver to a position where the draw can be safely agreed. Ding Liren, of course, 1.5 all against Gukesh, and still the current world champion, all to play for. He's an undisputed world champion as well, and that actually takes things back a very, very long way. Let's take a quick look at some of the undisputed world champions of the past. And I mean, Magnus Carlsen, of course, Judith, is the most recent player on that list before Ding Liren, but what a set of names to have on screen here.
Well, it is amazing. Chess history is amazing, and we can say that, well, from my youth, of course, I was admiring quite a bit Spassky, but for him as a world champion, he was more famous for losing his match against Bobby Fischer. Of course, Tal was one of my favorite because of his style. He was an incredible person as well, but also his style was amazing. I was a kid cheering for Kasparov because I loved his style myself. At the time, I couldn't appreciate that much Karpov's positional play, but later on, I got to learn that too. And of course, later on with Kramnik and Anand and Magnus, they were very much in the time when I was competing with them. And it was so much pleasure to see them become world champions. And maybe now we are going to see new history unfolded right here, right in the next upcoming 2 weeks. So it is very exciting all the time when we see world championship matches going.
Νομίζω αν δεν υπήρχε αυτός ο κανονισμός θα είχαν δώσει τα χέρια τώρα και θα είχε τελειώσει πάλι.
Robert, similarly to Judith, I'm sure the past world championships and the past world champions have had a strong influence on your chess career. Are there any players in particular that you would like to highlight that you would say you draw particular inspiration from?
Well, I think, would be remiss not to draw inspiration from all of them, because they have all contributed to the game in innumerable ways, but if I had to pick one world champion of the past, Capablanca, I always loved looking at his games, and you're looking at them and you're like, he won this position? Like, you know that he's going to win somehow, but the how is the big question, and you're like, this looks like it just should be equal. He would just outplay people in end games, and I think that his technique was superb. So I remember when I was younger and my coach would
Και είναι και ο τρόπος που θα έρθει αυτό το παιχνίδι στο παλιά που δεν ξέρω. Νομίζω θα περάσει αρνητικά την ψυχολογία του Liren και αύριο θα είναι δύσκολο.
Games between Capablanca and all the best players of his era, and I just really loved the way that he was able to handle positions that looked quite level, and he would still be able to come out on top.
So the position here is fairly level. I suspect I'm going to ask a question that's going to elicit a very short answer here, Judith. There are a couple of ways for white to go wrong in this position. You do have to be tread a little bit carefully. Are there any ways for black to go wrong here? Like, what should Gukesh be watching out for?
Basically, I mean, the worst thing right now can happen to black is that somehow he forgets to defend the c5 pawn, and it is possible to be taken. Even then, the position will be a draw, but that would be very frustrating to allow that, because then they are going to be sitting here not until move 40, but they're going to be sitting until move 60 or 70, even though it's a draw. But in a World Championship match, you like to press your opponent just to show who is the boss. But this will not happen, because right now Gukesh is thinking, should I defend already right now in this move, the c5, which is actually not threatened to be taken because of the tactics, but minutes ago Robert was showing that rook d1 and actually white would be losing a queen. So his question is whether should I be protecting my pawn from the back from c8 or from the side, or should I be playing, let's say, h5, a move which cannot hurt my position, and only after that to defend it. He has the time for it. He can do whatever he wants. And there is no chance to win for either side unless there is a huge blunder.
Ναι, πρέπει να γίνει μεγάλη ευλεψία για να υπάρξει νικητής τώρα, μην τρελαθούμε σε αυτό το επίπεδο.
At the
Αυτό
same
για να
time,
γίνει.
I think Gukesh is enjoying the moment that he had a good game. There is not too much to think about in this position, but still they have to go all the way until move 40. Maybe he can also think about it, that what is the move that we can make repetitions. But indeed, the position itself, it doesn't give all the need to spend too much time on it.
Robert, I'm going to ask you to put coach's hat on just for a second. Let's imagine that the players decide that torture is the name of the game, and we are going to go to move 60 or 70, even though it looks like this is going to end in a draw. Let's say the queens come off. We have an end game where white has one extra pawn on the king side, but black has a pass pawn, admittedly an isolated pass pawn on the opposite side. Both sides with rooks on the board. Again, theoretical draw, but it is fairly technical, and there are more things that can go wrong.
Yeah, it's a very good question.
Άμα θέλουν τώρα μπορεί να παίξουν, να κάνουν κάτι τέτοιο.
You should always try to visualize what happens when those pieces are removed. So in the early stages of the game,
εγώ αν ήμουν ένα Gukesh αυτό θα έκανα. Θα του έλεγα, ok, ας κάνουμε 3 κινήσεις.
E3 pawn and black does not. Black has an outside pawn, the c pawn, and early stages, it means you don't control as many central squares, but in the later stages of the game, like we're in now, it means that you can sort of distract your opponent's pieces. If the queens and the rooks came off the board, then the white king would come over to the c file to help out.
Το να παίξει, ας πούμε, κίνηση βασιλιά εδώ δεν θα χάσει ότι του χαλάει κάτι. Και να πεις ότι ο άλλος θα το εκμεταλλευτεί και θα πει, α, ωραία. Είναι σαν να του λέει, πάμε να το τελειώσουμε. Δεν υπάρχει κάτι. Και άμα το κάνω ο Gukesh αυτό, δεν θα έχει κανένα νόημα να μην μπει νέο Liren, ο οποίος θεωρητικά, ας πούμε, είναι αυτός που υπάρχει μια πιθανότητα να χάσει αν δεν προσέξει, ξέρω εγώ.
Ding knows exactly what I was just speaking of. So I think that the more pieces that remain on the board, the less likely it is for black to have any chance of winning this game. So I think that for Ding, he will only trade when the time is right.
Both players still sat at the board in a fairly deep think. I'd like to cast our mind back just a little bit, Judith, to what Dania said, GM Daniel Naroditsky, a couple of days ago on this broadcast, where he was giving us a wonderful tale about how you sit there with a draw for 15 minutes and then you realize, oh, hang on a second, I was just thinking about how to beat my opponent the next day. Is that what Gukesh and Ding are thinking about
Πώς θα
right
τον
now?
κάνει να
What their
μπας και
openings
κάνει
are gonna
λάθος,
be
είναι
for
δυνατόν?
tomorrow?
No, I don't think they go too far as that. It's not a stressful moment for them to sit there and think. And the thing is that they have to. They cannot offer a draw to each other. So it's illegal. It's against the rules. So this is very important. And I think what he's thinking right here is to go rook c8 or rook d5, from which side he wants to be defending the pawn, or can he force a perpetuate check in some way, giving up the pawn.
Okay.
But of course they will have a press conference. Maybe they say, okay, what was the crucial moment? Why he played knight f3. So when things are starting to sharpen out, then immediately Ding pulls the brake. So this is something he will be thinking, of course, later on. And of course, we didn't talk about the coaches, the seconds so far. And we shouldn't forget that it's not only these two guys are playing there. There is a huge team working behind both of them. And of course, the team, for example, they are not watching this game, of course. Many times they are going to sleep during the time when the players are at the game. And of course, they come up with the strategy. So I think for me, it's always very interesting that how much does the strategy comes from the coach, and the coach initiates the next game strategy, and then the player is reacting to it. I like it, I don't like it, we go this way. Or is the player who initiates the idea?
Αν δεν βάλεις σεζόν στο γάμα 5 δεν μπορώ να νικήσω,
And of
Liren.
course, it's also a fact that we know from each player one that who is the second. It's Rapport from Hungary. He's a very creative player. Ding has a good relationship with him. He was his second in the previous match also, when he won the title. And for Gukesh, a former coach, Gajewski.
Α, εννοείς να έτρωγε το πιόνι και να φεύγαν οι βασίλισσες. Όχι, όσο είναι υπήρχε μέσα αυτό, αυτό θα ήταν ισοπαλία. Αυτά τα 3 με αυτά τα 4 και με τους υπήρχε μέσα. Το οποίο βέβαια δεν θα γίνει, έτσι δεν θα το δώσει το πιόνι ποτέ. Αν κάποιος είναι να κερδίσει εδώ, είναι μόνο ο Gukesh. Αλλά δεν υπάρχει περίπτωση να κάνει τέτοιου είδους αυλεψία ο Liren. Δηλαδή. Δεν προκαταλάβω γιατί δεν τους επιτρέπουν να αποφασίσουν ισοπαλία πριν την 41η κίνηση.
And what the preparation looks like behind the scenes, because that's always fun to speculate and have a guess and work out who's.
Αλλά η θέση βολεύει να κινήσουν τους βαθιάδες και να τελειώσουν.
For now, though, while we wait for this game to slowly reach its conclusion, let's go ahead and cast our eyes back and take a look at the history of the FIDE World Championship, because there's quite a lot to cover, and it all culminates in 2024 in Singapore.
No chess event has more prestige than the World Chess Championship. For nearly 140 years, we've had amazing stories, legends, and epic battles between intellectual giants. Since 1886, we've had a World Chess Champion, the title passing from victor to vanquisher. But one thing a lot of people don't know is that early on, the World Chess Champion controlled the entire process. They got to choose who and when they would play. That all changed after World War II, when the then reigning world champion Alexander Aljohin suddenly died while holding the title. FIDE would then step in to fill the void and take control of the process. In 1948, Mikhail Botvinnik became the first ever FIDE World Champion. The title of World Chess Champion became a political symbol, controlled and flexed by the Soviet
Έπαιξε
Union, but that all changed in 1972.
Πύργο Δέλτα 5, έχουμε τα 3, έχουμε μερικές κινήσεις. Κατά τη γνώμη μου παρέτηση έπρεπε να απαγορεύεται να βλέπουμε και κάνα ματ. Εντάξει, τώρα σε αυτό το επίπεδο τι θα μπορούσε να γίνει, ξέρω εγώ.
Fast forward to 1993, the Soviet Union is no more, yet we somehow have two world chess champions. The reigning title holder at the time,
εννοείς γενικότερα, για να βλέπουμε μέχρι τέλους.
Launching his own organization called the PCA, or Professional Chess Association. And many people don't know that it wouldn't be until 2006 that the two championship titles would finally become one once again as Vladimir Kramnik unified the claim to the crown. A year later, and Vishy Anand would defeat Vladimir Kramnik, becoming India's first world chess champion. In 2013, Magnus Carlsen would take the title from Viswanathan Anand, becoming Norway's first world champ. Magnus would hold on to the title for 10 years, until he chose to abdicate his throne and walk away. Now, the world is once again watching every move. The 17th world champion Ding Liren looks to defend his title against the 18-year-old Dommaraju Gukesh, who looks to follow in Vishy Anand's footsteps and bring the title back to India. Who is next in line for the most coveted title in chess? We're gonna find out.
30η κίνηση, έχει ακόμα δρόμο. Λες να φάνε και το χρόνο να το ξοδέψουνε.
So a very interesting history there of the FIDE World Championship. There wasn't always one World Championship as well, Judith. Plenty of history there, but ultimately everything's been unified since Vladimir Kramnik did that in the early 2000s, and now we're looking forward to either keeping the 17th world champion or crowning the 18th world champion. That's not going to be decided today. There's still a long road ahead, but the players themselves will know how much of a rich and steeped history this championship title holds.
Oh yeah, every chess player's dream is to become a world champion, and for these two players it was.
Δεν μπορεί να φάει εδώ.
Even though he did not have a very straightforward path to it, because he got an opportunity to be playing the candidate for very fortunate for him reasons, though he belonged there completely, and as we see, he later on became the world champion. And of course, what an opportunity for Gukesh.
Φαίνεται θα παίξουν κάποιες κινήσεις ακόμα.
Is just so much straightforward. He has such a focus on the game, and he has such a support from his parents and everyone. And he was one of that kid who was visiting the Chennai World Championship match between Anand and Carlsen, which must have been an incredible occasion for him to see where he really wants to be. And for India, it was a very sad moment because Vishy lost the crown, but we gained a new world champion who made a lot of great shift in chess, I believe. And still, of course, Anand made an incredible contribution to Indian chess. And I have a feeling that there will be some new waves also, new talents. Is just non-stop. It's just something very special and unique going on in India with talented players, the approach, incredible coaches. Chess-Base India is giving such a support to them. And right now we are seeing a position where Gukesh style played f5, which actually I have to tell you I'm quite surprised at, because I was expecting that he's going to be moving g6, let's say, and immediately offering this opportunity to Ding to play e4, pushing away the rook, and then there is an exchange of pawns so they can really just move back and forth with any of their pieces. But suddenly he goes f5, very typically in his nature, to make an aggressive and sharp move, which actually I said, no, I'm not letting you to play e4. It's going to be a draw, but let's play a little bit further. You never know.
It does feel a bit that way, doesn't it? We've got pawn pushes on the board, opting not to go for maybe something simpler where we just trade off a pair of pawns and shuffle the pieces around. Almost like a little bit of a test for Ding here, Robert, just to say, well, hang on a second. Let's try a couple of more small things first and make sure you're not about to fall into some sort of trap.
It's a weakening move. It stops e4, but it does open up the diagonal. The black king may lose some of its safety, but white just doesn't have enough firepower. You would need to get both your rook and your queen on the final rank, and even then you don't have a checkmating.
Μπορεί κάποιος να κάνει πρόοδο τώρα εδώ. Θα πρέπει ο άλλος. Εντάξει, γιατί τα μαύρα είναι αυτά που μπορούν να κάνουν. Θα πρέπει τα λευκά να κάνουν κάτι τρομακτικό λάθος.
Turn here, because as Judith said, g6, e4, rook to d4. We get this position where the pieces are coming off, and importantly, rook d1 check, which was a deflection tactic before, still available, but white does not have to take. There's a pawn on g3 now, which means that there is space. The white king goes to h2, importantly, not g2, and then we are forcing everything off the board, and actually black might even be down a pawn, but still, it would be a draw in the rook endgame. Judy mentioned that a long time ago. So instead of playing rook d1,
ο να περιμένει μπορεί τίποτα παραπάνω.
Now we have rook and 3 versus rook and 3, all on the same side of the board. This would have made them.
Αλλά στο επίπεδο του Liren δεν νομίζω ότι μπορεί να κάνει τόσο τρομερό λάθος και να χάσει. Απλά ξέρεις, ο Gukesh προφανώς σκέφτεται, OK, αφού δεν μπορούμε να πάρουμε ισοπαλία μέχρι την 41η, θα παίξω και τι γίνει.
I'll ask the obvious interesting question.
Δεν θα έλεγα ότι μου πολύ άρεσε αυτό που κάνει ο Gukesh.
Relied upon in this position.
Είναι λίγο
F5 has been played. To what
bad
extent
manner, θα έλεγα.
can white attempt a g4 later down the line? Even if that still ends in a draw, are there pawn breaks here for white that can ask the question back at black? Judith, is there?
Τώρα έπαιξε το βασιλιά ο Liren. Αλλά αν κάποιος πρέπει να δώσει τώρα την ισοπαλία εμέσως είναι ο Gukesh που έχει ας πούμε το πλεονέκτημα του πιονιού.
Or there is a very little chance to that. To tell you the truth, I have mixed feelings about this move f5. I see very much myself playing such moves. Because, for example, Anand, he was a very great expert in this also. If he decided that the game is draw, he will just focus on the draw. So he would just play g6. He plays the most efficient moves, inviting the opponent also that, okay, let's go for it. We just exchange everything and we're done.
Mm-hmm.
He was just so straightforward. And for example, I was able to make moves like this f5. I mean, as Robert said, it's a weakening move. I mean, it's not so much of a great active move. It's a weakening move. And you will not have real chances to win this game. It's just...
Θα φέρει και ο Gukesh βασιλιά, λες, Αθανάση. Για να δούμε. Okay.
I don't think there will be anything wrong with that, but it seems like both players know that it's
Είτε πέντε τελικά έπαιξε το βασιλιά του.
But still they are kind of teasing each other. Okay, king h7, now he put his king into the pin, right? So inviting him to play g4, let's say. But he's not playing g4. He's playing king queen c4. He's going to be playing.
Τώρα ας πούμε εγώ θα περίμενα ότι όντως θα έπαιζε το βασιλιά, αλλά έπαιξε βασίλισσα. Okay. Είτε παιδί θα τον ωραία κίνηση, θα μείνει μόνος ο βασιλιάς. Να μένει λίγο εκτεθειμένος πίσω και δεν το θέλεις.
Gukesh is 18. We've got time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but in this position, for example, you cannot play
περίεργο.
g6 anymore. Don't play g6 because after that already rook b1, rook b7 on the 7th.
περίεργο που δεν πάει, που δεν έπαιξε εγώ πίσω.
So
δεν μπορούσε, ναι.
Sometimes it's better to just sit and wait or to be very solid. So from this point of view, f5 was something that I would really like to pose the question to Wishy. You know, what do you think about f5?
There are certainly, like, white is asking black a couple of questions right now. I think the one thing I want to ask Robert is, now that white has played queen c4, the number of moves you can use to shuffle around the position, it's not massive right now. The rook can't move sideways. You're still busy defending c5, for example. So black's options, while this position is still completely equal, they're a little bit limited here.
I do think it's a bit riskier for black than it is for white, because as Ding is showing us, he can just go back and forth, and the rook on d5 is stuck protecting the pawn on c5. So Yeah, this position, Ding is not risking anything, and Gukesh, he knows he's solid, and I like Judith's explanation. He's 18, why not just play this on?
All right, well, he's playing it on for now, even if we believe the game is steering towards a draw. We're going to go for a quick tea and coffee break. Go ahead and top up your drinks, and when we come back, the likely conclusion of game number 4 here at the FIDE World Championship.
Μάρ Βασίλη σε F4 και χαιρετίσματα. Ναι, Βασίλη.
This is the Google Pixel 9 with Gemini. And this is Dan, suggesting some places to meet up and watch the game tonight. But you know what's better than a list of places? Knowing how close those places are. Which is why you're just going to ask Gemini to put these places on a map. Whoa, how's that for teamwork?
Let's dive into Gukesh's top 3 show-stopping moves of his career so far. And at number 1 is a huge game from the candidates.
Βασίλισσα Δέλτα 6.
Vidit Gujarati with the white pieces against Gukesh Dommaraju. Now Gukesh has just lost round 7, the only loss that he had in the candidates against Ali Reza. And this is how the 17-year-old bounced back right after playing with black. It has been a model game against the Italian. A brilliant one. In case you missed it, I highly recommend you take a check on it, because the whole strategy was around Gukesh infiltrating from the queen side, one side of the board, and then eventually ending the game with a checkmate on the other side of the board. He's kept the pressure on Vidit for pretty much the entire game, and here Vidit made the move G-pawn, moving 2 steps forward, clearing the way for the white rook to attack the queen and hitting the black knight at the same time. 2 pieces hanging. And this is the moment I want you to pause. I want you to channel your inner Gukesh. I want you to channel your puzzle rush god mode. Black to play. One of the wackiest positions from the candidates, and one of the most beautiful moves of the candidates. Here, Gukesh played the stunning rook takes knight. Black has got 3 pieces hanging. White has got 4 different captures, where all roads lead to Rome, and Rome is checkmate on Vidit's king on h4. Let's take a look at all the different captures. If white picks up the knight at the edge of the board, rook takes pawn is game over. Instead, if you capture the rook with the g-pawn, queen to g3 is checkmate. And after rook takes knight, my favorite, the most beautiful, if you capture the black queen, who needs a queen when you can get to the king? g5, a small pawn move with big effects, that's checkmate on the board. Take a look at this. Let this position just sink in. Absolutely crazy stuff. g5 would have been game over. Nothing can be picked up. Instead, after rook takes knight, Vidit captured the rook with the e-pawn. This only delays the inevitable. A check on the board, the king forced to move forward. And now, after the knight retreats to h7, giving another check, Vidit resigns, as the only move is picking up the knight, and queen takes pawn would have been checkmate.
This December, the world's top chess minds clash in the heart of New York City at the FIDE World Rapid and Blitz Championship. Witness world number 1 Magnus Carlsen and other stars from across the globe. Rapid and Blitz, chess in its most thrilling form, unpredictable and unforgettable. Fast moves, tactics and blunders, and moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Witness the pinnacle of chess excitement. Get your tickets now at worldrapidandblitz.fide.com.
Ωραία, το έφαγε.
No more fancy openings, no swashbuckling middle games, no attacks. We're here to tell you about what comes after that.
I'm taking the time for prophylactic moves in this apparently pretty sharp position. Probably at this point, the knight is better, but the game shows that it's possible to play around it.
Βασίλισσα ε4. Τα 5, ωραία. Πήγανε και οι βασίλισσες. 37η κίνηση. Καρφώσει τον πύργο Liren και θα πρέπει να ανταλλάξει ο βασίλισσος Gukesh. Ναι.
Live from Singapore here, where we are reaching the final
Αυτό που
moments
είπες
of
έγινε,
this game.
Κωνσταντίνε.
The queens are now off the board as well. We've got the king coming into the center. We're looking for an opportunity to repeat or similar, but this position is just constantly simplified. So Robert, Judith, looks like this one's ending pretty swiftly.
Oh, it definitely is about to end. We have hit move 38 and cannot offer a draw until move 40. And I think, Judith, you know, we always do this thing where we look to see where can the draw be made. Rook d4 check was played by Gukesh. I think king e3, rook d5, king e4, that's going to be the draw.
Τώρα σε τρεις κινήσεις πιστεύω θα
πούνε για ισοπαλία. White will be going back to e3. At the same time, king e5 could be an interesting try. But after that, black would be looking for counter chances and counterplay and starts attacking the white pawns from the side on rook d2. And then if the white pawn is pushed, then the black rook will be attacking the new weakened pawns on g3 and h3. So I think this is exactly the right time to play king e3 and finally repeating the moves, even though they reach move 40 in the next move, and they could even offer a draw finally.
But will they? That's the big question. I feel like it's become more and more popular to play the game out until stalemate. For example, if it's king and pawn versus king, instead of just agreeing to a draw, it's playing till the bitter end. And I don't think in this game that they will do that. I think they'll just repeat moves. But the fact that Ding is thinking here, Judah, is there a universe where he wants to play king e5 and is hoping that there would be, I mean, I can't even call it winning chances, because even if black loses the c5 pawn, it's still a theoretical draw.
I can bet now on any money prospect that he's going to be playing king e3. Maybe it's a very great thing from me, but he was looking on the score sheet, he's looking back, he's just spending few seconds.
Μπορεί να πάει γι' αυτό.
And thinking, but he's not really thinking. He's just playing king e3.
Κάτι τέτοιο, ας πούμε.
There is no reason. Sorry, there is no reason to play king e5 because after rook d2, it's nothing white can look for there.
No, of course, and I was just going to say that sometimes players, they drag these games out because they want dinner to open, but it's already quite late in Singapore, so they don't need to wait for any restaurants or anything of the sort. I am curious, like, if they get asked this in the press conference, like, why did you not make this draw sooner? I'm just curious what the answer would be, but you can't fault the players. It's well within their rights to continue the game on as long as they want, and here we see the king move played. King, I think, back to e3 was the choice, and we're going to see this repetition.
Of course. I didn't lose my money, you see. I made my bet on king e3, so this was an obvious repetition, and we have 2.5, yeah? Just in one move away.
Yes, we're going to get to that draw in move 4 here, and well, I think that was move 40, so they could have asked for a draw, but they will just force the draw. Everyone who maybe
αλλά θα μπορούσαν να το είχαν κάνει 10 κινήσεις πριν, έτσι.
3 times, the game concludes.
Και παραπάνω.
A split point, and there it is. The handshake is in. The draw is agreed to. It is 2-2 after 4 games here in the 2024 FIDE World Championship. Judith, you see the players, they're signing the score sheets. They're not even talking about the game. Do you feel that they don't think there's that much to discuss?
Οπότε, μένει να δούμε αύριο. Θα έχει τα λευκά Gukesh. Πιστεύω θα πιέσει πολύ για την νίκη αύριο. Ναι, μας παίξανε μπάλα, Δημήτρη. Δεν είχε όμως κάτι το... Δηλαδή αν εξαιρέσουμε εδώ τη θέση αυτή που θα μπορούσε να παίξει κάτι του στυλ Z4 και να έχει και από εδώ κάτι, έτσι θα άνοιγε και πιο πολύ παρτίδα. Αν πεις μπορεί και να είχαν έτσι. Okay. Αλλιώς δεν υπήρχε κάτι. Και όλα αυτά γιατί τον είχε στην προετοιμασία. Ήξερε. Εδώ. Εγώ πιστεύω ότι εδώ έδειξε ότι ήξερε. Μετά φτάσαμε εδώ που έδωσε τους αξιωματικούς. Πού ήτανε? Εδώ πέρα. Εδώ είναι σαν να λέει ο Gukesh, πάμε μάλλον για ισοπαλία. Οπότε μετά, αφού φύγανε οι αξιωματικοί, δεν γινότανε κάτι εδώ. Εδώ και εδώ, επί της ουσίας, και ο Liren προτείνει ισοπαλία. Δεν το κάνει κατευθείαν ο Gukesh, σου λέει πάρ' το εσύ πάνω σου και καλά. Αλλά μετά από εδώ νομίζω... Από εδώ και μετά νομίζω δεν υπήρχε νόημα. Ίδια ώρα, Δημήτρη, ίδια ώρα. Βάλανε από ένα γκολ και είναι 2-2. Ναι, κάπως έτσι. Ναι, έπρεπε ζητά 4 και το α5 η Θαλάσσια πρέπει να κρατήσει τα α4 και τα 4 στις θέσεις τους. Ενδεχομένως θα ήταν ρίσκο βέβαια, δεν ήθελε να ρισκάρει, αλλά πώς άμα δεν ρισκάρεις και λίγο πώς θα πας για την νίκη, ξέρω εγώ. Πάντως ο Gukesh στα δύο παιχνίδια που έπαιξε με τα λευκά ο Liren έδειξε ότι μπορεί να του πάρει την ισοπαλία. Σήμερα δεν βρήκαμε τον νικητή, οπότε δεν πάμε ταμείο. Ναι, ζητά 4-4, ναι Κωνσταντίνο κατάλαβα. After that, when Ding centralized the knight to knight d4, και είχες και τον αξιωματικό εδώ να υποστηρίζει το d4, μπορούσε να το δοκιμάσει, αλλά δεν ήθελε για κάποιο λόγο. Εντάξει. Δεν παίρνει ρίσκα μέχρι τώρα ο Liren από ό,τι είδα, τουλάχιστον με τα λευκά. Όταν έπαιξε την πρώτη παρτίδα με τα μαύρα όμως, ήταν διαφορετικός. Για να δούμε αύριο τι θα κάνει. Πώς θα αντιμετωπίσει την προετοιμασία του Gukesh. Θα είναι σαν την πρώτη παρτίδα να βρει κάτι και να ξεφύγει ή θα είναι σαν την άλλη που έχασε και να πάρει το lead ο Gukesh. Τέλος πάντων, θα το δούμε. Εγώ είπα από την αρχή, η ισοπαλία θα πάει, δεν ήταν στη ψηφοφορία. Ωραία, αύριο θα βάλω και την ισοπαλία μέσα. Αν και από ό,τι έχω καταλάβει, ο περισσότερος κόσμος ψηφίζει με βάση το τι θα ήθελε. Δηλαδή πιστεύω και αύριο που θα είναι με τα μαύρα ο Liren, πάλι Liren θα βγει. Θα δούμε όμως. Αύριο θα είσαι Κωνσταντίνε ή έχεις έλειες αύριο? To the specifics because the opening itself was quite unusual, perhaps cooked up by Ding Liren's second Richard report. So we saw knight f3, already a change from game 2 when Ding Liren had the white pieces, and we saw a quiet approach e3 on the second move. Λες Βασίλη, κάτσε, μην βιάζει, μην βιάζει. Είναι νωρίς ακόμα. Εντάξει, ο Κινέζος μπορεί να δείχνει λίγο αδύναμος, αλλά νομίζω δεν θα είναι τόσο εύκολο. Δεν ξέρω άμα κρατήσει. Έχει ακόμα δρόμο. Και να πάρει το προβάδισμα αύριο Gukesh και να κερδίσει, εγώ δεν θα το καταδίκαζα το Liren, ακόμα και αν χάσει αύριο.
with a move like c4 in response, just challenging the black center, perhaps leaving black eventually with an isolated queen pawn, which can be uncomfortable.
Όπως και να έχει θα δούμε. Τώρα την άλλη εβδομάδα ξεκινάει και το ελληνικό, θα δούμε τώρα πώς θα γίνει. Ακόμα δεν έχει βγει πρόγραμμα, δεν ξέρω τι παρτίδες θα παιχτούν. Όπως και να έχει θα το δούμε. Πέρα από τον πρώτο γύρο μπορείς να πεις ότι ευνηδιάστηκε, το έχει πάρει τον Άρη. Ναι, κοίτα, είναι αντικειμενικά είναι και το φαβορί. Ο Liren δεν ήταν σε καλή κατάσταση γενικότερα. Πέρασε κάποια προβλήματα με την υγεία του, κάτι και πέρασε κατάθλιψη, λένε διάφορα τέτοια. Ζορίστηκε κάπως έτσι ο Liren και γι' αυτό έπεσε. Τώρα από ό,τι είχε δηλώσει ότι νιώθει καλύτερο, ότι είναι καλύτερα. Τώρα θα δούμε. Τον ρώτησε κιόλας μία προχθές, γιατί έχουν πάει γονείς του, ξέρω εγώ, και είναι μαζί να το στηρίζουν και λέει ναι, τον βοηθάει αυτό πολύ και τέτοια, ξέρεις. Εντάξει, είναι παίκτης ψυχολογίας. Θα δούμε. Πιστεύω ότι δεν θα τον πάρει κάτω βόλτα. Δηλαδή δεν θα πάμε τώρα σε συνεχόμενες νίκες του Gukesh. Ακόμα και αν κερδίσει αύριο, πιστεύω υπάρχει ακόμα μια αυτή να κάνει ξανά comeback ο Liren. Και από εκεί πέρα να δούμε. Αλλά θα δούμε τώρα, αυτή είναι η δικιά μου οπτική, ας το πούμε. Εσύ λες, να, ο Κωνσταντίνος μου λέει άμα χάσει ο Liren αύριο τελείωσε. Εγώ δεν είμαι τόσο σίγουρος, Κωνσταντίνε. Δεν ξέρω αν το λέω επειδή θέλω να μην είναι έτσι, αλλά νομίζω όχι. Πιστεύω ότι έχει τις δυνατότητες. Να είσαι μπροστά με ένα μηδέν τα μαύρα και να χάνεις. Μετά είναι πολύ ζώρικο ψυχολογικά. Ναι, η αλήθεια είναι ότι πήρε καλό πλεονέκτημα τα μαύρα και το πέταξε μετά. Αλλά εντάξει, οκ. Είναι τελικός του παγκοσμίου, δηλαδή, οκ. Να κερδίσει και μετά θα παίρνει ισοπαλίες. Λες να κερδίσει αύριο Gukesh και μετά να πηγαίνουμε στις ισοπαλίες, κάπως έτσι. Ενδεχομένως, θα το δούμε. Αν κερδίσει αύριο Gukesh, έτσι, μην το δέσουμε και σίγουρο. Δεν είναι και σίγουρο. Towards the black weaknesses. So instead of all this, we saw rook c8, a great move, I would say, from Gukesh. We saw οπότε στο poll αύριο, για να δούμε
τι
θα ψηφίσει ο κόσμος. Γι'
αυτό
έγραψα ποιος πιστεύει, το έχει ποιος θέλετε, γιατί αν έγραφα ποιος θέλετε θα ήταν πιστεύω ακόμα περισσότερο. Στον Liren δείχνει ανήμπος, θα δυσκολέψει, έχει χάσει και από χρόνο. Ναι, αυτό με το χρόνο. Εντάξει, σήμερα πάντως με το χρόνο δεν είχε πρόβλημα. Κανείς από τους δύο βέβαια. Εντάξει, από ένα σημείο και μετά, η παρτίδα έδειχνε ότι πάει ισοπαλία, αλλά και πριν από αυτό δεν είχαν ιδιαίτερο θέμα με χρόνο. Κανείς από τους δύο. Κρίμα, γιατί έπαιξε ρέτι και ήθελε να παίξει ρέτι και πίστεψα στο ρέτι, αλλά έπαιξε περίεργο άνοιγμα. Αλλά φάνηκε ότι το ήξερε ο Gukesh. Δυστυχώς. Βλέπεις τώρα, δηλαδή αυτοί οι παίκτες είναι σε αυτό το επίπεδο και γνωρίζουν τόσο πολλές παρτίδες και τις έχουν στο μυαλό του. Εντάξει, όχι απ' έξω όλες, αλλά ήξερε φίλε τώρα αυτό. Δηλαδή, πώς ήξερε τώρα αυτό το άνοιγμα να παίξει εκεί το θ6 και να δείξει ότι το ξέρει. Θα δούμε τι θα πούνε και στη συνέντευξη τύπου. Πάντως ο Gukesh έχει κερδίσει τη συμπάθειά μου, πριν έλεγα άλλος ένας πιτσιρικάς είναι. Κοίταξε, στη συνέντευξη τύπου που τον είδα φαίνεται όριμος για την ηλικία του. Μιλάει έτσι ωραία. Απλά εμένα ο Liren μου είναι πιο συμπαθής σαν φυσιογνωμία, σαν τέτοιο. Με αυτή την έννοια. Μου βγάζει έτσι κάτι να το συμπαθήσεις, ρε παιδί μου.
Maybe white would have some chances, but this is not at all what you want. This is clearly good.
Είναι και το outsider τώρα και μου αρέσει γενικά να υποστηρίζω outsiders.
Knight f3 back was played, and after a series of exchanges here, d4 is a nice move, just trying to swap off a potential weakness, and then we saw mass liquidation, which didn't really require all that much conversation, because as this game continued, we see trade after trade, and as these pieces come off the board,
δεν είχε όμως κάτι το
the last moment that actually
από ό,τι είδα.
required a little bit of thought here is, say, this move queen to c2. If you were to play queen c3, offering the trade of queens, that seems like a good idea, but immediately the bar plummets.
Όπως και να έχει, θα δούμε τι θα γίνει αύριο. Λοιπόν, αυτά από μένα, παιδες. Σας ευχαριστήσω που ήσασταν εδώ για την παρέα. Ευχαριστήσω το Σίμω για το super chat δωρεάν. Ευχαριστήσω τον Δημήτρη που έγινε μέλος. Και όλους σας που ήσασταν εδώ και είδαμε μαζί την παρτίδα. Λοιπόν, καλή συνέχεια από μένα, παιδιά, και θα τα πούμε αύριο. Να είστε καλά.
Queen takes c3, black would be up material, but that, of course, was not going to happen. And after a bunch more moves, there was, some small thing here or there where things could have changed. But ultimately, when all is said and done, the queens came off the board.